Chapter 2032. Outside the He Mansion, Zine's group stood on an unfamiliar street without any relatives. Although He Sun didn't chase them away directly, his actions were no different from kicking them out. Time can really change many things. He Sun wasn't such a person in the past. Zine looked up at the sky and laughed bitterly. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. Ancestor Chu lowered his head and sighed. Chizu looked at Ancestor Chu silently. There was a hidden meaning in his words. There's an expert in the back hall of the He Mansion. His divine will aura is far stronger than the Crane Lord. He's definitely not an ordinary person. It's very likely that he's from the college. Ancestor Chu said. What did Senior know? Wuk was surprised. The divine fire, cultivated by the Chu family, is related to the soul. Ancestor Chu's judgment can't be wrong. Zine knew the talents of the Kunlun family like the back of his hand. If so, He Sun's style wouldn't be strange. He probably wants to send his relatives to the college, but the quota is limited. That's why the Crane Lord turned hostile when we made the request. Ancestor Chu guessed. Zine's request affected the Crane Lord's interests. No matter what, entering the college is much harder than we thought. Chizu sighed. Then what should we do now? Wuk asked. Let's go to the Heavenly Book Pavilion to comprehend the heavenly wheel divine will of the infinite divine Lord and alleviate the suppression of the heavenly might on us. Zine said. As time passed, the longer he stayed in the divine realm, the more uncomfortable he felt. His body and soul seemed to be imprisoned by an invisible force. He knew that this was the power of the infinite world. He needed to borrow the power of the infinite world to alleviate it. And everyone nodded. At this time, a movement came from behind. Everyone looked over and saw Qin Hao squatting in front of the Crane residence's door, collecting the herbs that the Emperor's servant threw out, one by one, and storing them into his storage ring. Junior 3, why? Tai Chu frowned. Where's his backbone? There's nothing wrong with the herbs. If I don't take them, the servants will secretly hide them and sell them when they see us leave. Since that's the case, why should we let others benefit? Qin Hao said as he carefully took care of the medicinal herbs. He didn't want to waste too much. Let's go. Zine let out a long breath, feeling a little better. He Sun threw out the medicinal ingredients, indicating the other party's attitude. He wanted to completely cut off all ties with the Kunlun Sea and did not owe them anything. There was a faint trace of humiliation. However, what Qin Hao said was right. Medicinal herbs themselves were not guilty. As a qualified alchemist, medicinal herbs were the foundation of their livelihood and should not be wasted. The streets of the seamless divine region were incomparably bustling. Although the Crane estate was located in the outer regions, this region was even more prosperous and bustling than an ordinary capital city of the Tao of Heaven. Whether it was in terms of the cultivations of the passers-by on the streets or the scale of the shops that stood on either side of the streets, the Kunlun continent simply couldn't compare. Qin Hao and the others walked quietly, asking for directions as they walked. There was a lot of divine Tao aura here. As the core divine region of a large world, the number of heavenly wheel realm experts was beyond imagination. It was fine to sense it roughly, but if one was too focused on a certain place, it would easily cause dissatisfaction to the heavenly wheel realm experts who live there. They might even counterattack with divine intent. In order to not affect others and avoid attracting trouble for oneself, it was better to ask for directions. The outer regions of the divine region were extremely large. Many bustling roads crisscrossed in all directions like veins. There were many cities standing in between these veins. Those cities looked like cities up close, but from afar, they looked like independent residences. One could imagine how huge this seamless divine region was. Further ahead is the territory of an almighty in the seamless divine region. It's called the West Capital. There's a heavenly tome pavilion built by the Academy to enshrine the power of the Divine Master. Divine God Tai Chu pointed at a particularly majestic city in front of them. He had heard that the heavenly tome pavilions in the outer regions of the divine region were built in cities, and these cities were all guarded by an expert. The place they were heading to now was called the West Capital. The expert guarding the West capital was famous in the divine region. People called him Sikong. His cultivation was extremely tyrannical, and he had a hobby of protecting his own. Just now, the cultivators of the divine region said that City Lord Sikong's heavenly wheel realm has 4 divine veins. He cultivates the incomparably domineering fire sword Dao. In the entire western region of the divine region, City Lord Sikong is the strongest sword god. No one can compete with him. Taichu spoke with a respectful tone. Just hearing the rumors from others was enough to show how powerful City Lord Sikong was. A 4-meridian heavenly wheel realm expert was definitely a top existence in the Kunlun continent. Even Zine was not his opponent. After entering the West capital, you all better behave. Zine warned. 4-meridian heavenly wheel realm expert who had cultivated for at least 40,000 years. The grade of City Lord Sikong's heavenly wheel was probably not low. Otherwise, how could he become the strongest person in the Western Divine region? They definitely could not afford to offend such an expert. Everyone nodded silently. Rumble, just at this moment, an earth-shattering sound came from behind them. In an instant, the street shook violently. Even the stone slabs on the ground were shaking. Even the space was rippling with a powerful sound. Listening to this sound, it was as if a carriage was forcefully crushing the void. Run! Young Master C is back. Everyone, run quickly. The bustling street became incomparably chaotic in the blink of an eye. Everyone had a panicked expression, as if they had bumped into a ghost. In an instant, they lost their sense of propriety. No matter where the front was, as long as it was an alley, they would run blindly like a group of headless flies. Young Master C? Qin Hao muttered. Who was it? Do you want to die? Quickly find a place to hide. At the side, a bare-chested burly man with a full beard shouted at Qin Hao and the rest who were in a daze. His 2 large hands were desperately trying to hold the door together. The dignified, burly man looked like a frightened little girl. Luck stared. This burly man was emitting the aura of a Nirvana Level 8 law. Rumble. The violent sound of rolling wheels was getting closer and closer. It was as if the wheels were crushing one's soul. Ferocious dragon roars sounded in the air. Zine did not have time to turn around and look. He shouted, "Quickly, get out of the way." After saying that, everyone moved quickly and hurriedly hid at the side of the street. They all felt that the big movement behind them was coming for them. However, one person did not move. Qin Hao stood like a boulder in his original spot. He slowly turned around and curiously looked towards the source of the sound. He wondered just what kind of monster could cause so many cultivators of the Divine Realm streets to run for their lives in fear. The next second, he saw it. It was a carriage that couldn't be called luxurious and was even a little unsightly. The rusty iron sheets cracked from the skeleton, like broken blades curling horizontally. As the wheels moved, sharp scraping sounds could be heard. The 4 wheels were also out of shape. Therefore, the carriage's state of movement was very turbulent. One was high and one was low. It was like a bouncing piece of scrap iron. There was a figure standing on the chariot. He looked like a general who had just returned from the battlefield. His armor was stained with blood and covered with wounds. However, this person's appearance was not at all valiant. His curly reddish-brown hair looked like a chicken's nest, and his shifty-eyed facial features were laughing without restraint. His tattered cloak flapped around his shoulders. He drove the chariot and whipped the laborers in front of him, as if to show off his bravery. Behind him, there was a tattered flag that had been burned through and stuck in the chariot. Overall, the clothes were not bad, but the person was too shabby. This was Qin Hao's evaluation. However, what made Qin Hao's face tremble was that the laborers pulling the young man's carriage were 3 divine dragons. Their bodies were as red as blood, and their bodies were burning with raging flames. They flew all the way and ran rampant. Each divine dragon exuded the aura of the divine path. Obviously, they were 3 demon immortals who had cast the heavenly wheel. This caused Qin Hao's heart to tremble the moment he laid eyes on the chariot. A dragon, a true divine dragon, an existence on the level of a demon god, was pulling the chariot of a flawless brat who had not even reached Nirvana realm. Chu-san, why don't you get out of the way? Zine's shout came and hit Qin Hao's eardrums heavily. The three fire dragons were demon immortals. Even if they did not attack, the power of a head-on collision was no small matter. Moreover, the path of the young man in the carriage just happened to be Qin Hao, who was standing in the middle of the street. However, it was too late. As soon as Zine's voice fell, a terrible dragon force descended in front of him. In an instant, Qin Hao's silver hair swayed wildly and was extremely messy. It was as if a storm was blowing in front of him, mixed with a terrible burning force. The power of the flames of the three demon immortals' fire dragons could be imagined. Qin Hao didn't move. He stretched out his palm and slammed it toward the chariot. Beneath his robes, countless fire particles swirled about as a blinding halo of light appeared around him. It was as though he had lost his physical form and transformed into a towering pillar of divine fire. In just an instant, the halo of light faded back into nothingness. Buzz! A huge emblem was born under Qin Hao's palm. Wisps of flames flowed like a curtain of flame between him and the dragon carriage, turning into a natural moat on the street. The three fire dragons suddenly felt the extreme fire intent, as if they did not expect Qin Hao's divine firepower to be so strong. While they were stunned, they hurriedly stopped. Suddenly, the carriage behind them lost its balance and crashed into the fire dragon in the middle. The fire dragon let out a howl and pushed its head forward. With a loud bang, it collided with the curtain of light under Qin Hao's palm. Immediately, sparks flew and the curtain of light shattered. Qin Hao seemed to have been hit by a moving mountain. He slid more than 10 meters from the ground and shattered the stone tiles on the ground. However, the carriage was also completely blocked. Because it happened so suddenly, as if it had never encountered such a thing before, the brave, young man who was driving the carriage fell down and flew over the heads of the three demon immortals like a dog pouncing on its prey. He landed right under Qin Hao's feet. "I am my mother." The young man howled in pain. The blood-stained helmet fell from his head and rolled all the way until no one knew where it went. He raised his head with a grimace and raised his hands from the ground. His palms were red and trembling. It seemed like he had fallen quite hard. "Are you okay?" Qin Hao lowered his body and said with concern, "Okay, your grandpa." The young man glared angrily and raised his hand to slap Qin Hao's face. He, young Master C, had never been in such a miserable situation in his life. Falling on the ground on the street, where would he put his face? His life of brilliance was completely ruined. Chapter 2033. Wooling Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Something caught my attention. A slap came at his face. Qin Hao immediately straightened his posture and dodged it. He said, "Why did you hit me for no reason?" The young man stood up from the ground and tidied up his clothes to maintain his valiant appearance. Seeing that Qin Hao dared to dodge, he shouted, "Hit? I still want to kill." As he spoke, he reached behind his back and pulled out a copper gong from nowhere. He threw it at Qin Hao. Buzz! A loud buzzing sound was heard. The copper gong emitted a strong metallic light and turned into a sharp blade. It slashed directly at Qin Hao. At this time, there was a teeth-numbing grinding sound in the air. The sound moved forward together with the blade and vaguely had the effect of messing up one's soul. Qin Hao's eyes flashed with a strange light. He thought to himself that it was a divine weapon. Moreover, this copper gong seemed to be of high quality and had the rhythm of messing up the soul. Unfortunately, the cultivation of the young man who activated the divine weapon was too low. The copper gong was also sealed with a strong seal, which sealed most of its power. It could not cause any harm to Qin Hao. The moment the blade slashed at him, Qin Hao slapped it with a backhand. Dang! The copper gong was directly shaken to the side and hit a restaurant. The terrifying blade directly embedded into the wall of the restaurant, causing a huge crack. Oh ho! The young man did not seem to expect that the person in front of him would dare to dodge and even fight back. He raised his hand and waved in the direction of the copper gong. The divine weapon produced a strong vibration and turned into a sharp light wheel that immediately flew back. The young man pointed at Qin Hao, and the wheel blade relentlessly slashed at him. So arrogant and lawless. You attacked with a killing move. Is this how your elders taught you? Qin Hao's face was filled with displeasure. He stretched his right hand forward and knocked on the copper gong. Stop! Buzz! The spinning light was stuck in the middle and could not move forward. No matter how anxious the young man was, he could not control the copper gong anymore. Good boy, just you wait. Just you wait. The young man looked left and right, then turned and ran toward the broken car on the street. He took a divine spear from the car and held it with both hands. He walked with rhythmic steps and bravely rushed toward Qin Hao. He shouted, stab. Whoosh! A glaring spear light from his hand. The effect was excellent. It was quite shocking. It stabbed at his ass. It was as if the spear could penetrate everything. And stab the silver-haired man's heart. Qin Hao looked on and shook his head slightly. The spear was indeed not bad, and it was also a divine artifact. Unfortunately, it was sealed like a gong, and most of its power was sealed. Even if Qin Hao stood there and allowed the youth to stab him, the youth would not be able to hurt his divine body. After all, the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. How could a flawless Emperor's Tao break through the defense of a deity wheel? Translation art translation Qin Hao casually spat out a sentence, and with a flick of his finger, a ray of light shot out and collided with the spear radiance. In an instant, the spear radiance shattered, and the spear-wielding youth suffered a violent impact. He lost his balance and fell to the ground in front of everyone. The young man pointed at Qin Hao and roared angrily at the three fire dragons. This is pissing me off. What are you all looking at? Tear him apart. The three demon gods exchanged a glance with each other. In the next instant, the chains that bound the war chariot and their draconic bodies exploded into pieces. The void of the western divine region shook with astonishing draconic roars as they actually opened their gigantic mouths and lunged toward Qin Hao to swallow him whole. Danger! Tai Chu took a step forward, and Ancestor Chu, Qi Zhu, and Qin Xiaohe were also prepared to take action. However, at this moment, Zine shook his head at everyone, indicating that they should not interfere. The identity of the chicken nest youth driving the tattered war chariot was unknown, but from his attire and the fact that he was protected by a demon god, he was definitely the son of a great expert in the divine region. Since this place was close to the western capital, there was an 80% chance that he was related to City Lord Seacone. If a battle between gods was directly started, then the people of the Kunlun Sea would no longer be able to establish themselves in the divine region, because there would no longer be a place for them to stay. Moreover, although the three fire dragons had cultivated to the level of demon gods, the divine intent they emitted was very weak, and their cultivation couldn't be very high. Zine guessed that they should have just stepped into the divine way not long ago. From the looks of it, even if the three demon gods joined forces, they still wouldn't be able to shake Qin Hao's perfect heaven wheel. Therefore, I didn't need to interfere, they just needed to wait and see. They're simply too arrogant. Qin Hao raised his eyes and glanced at the three demon gods and fire dragons without any fear. The chicken nest U-style was a little too rampant. He even dared to act so recklessly in the divine region. Roar! A huge flaming figure smashed down, bringing along rolling flames. Qin Hao's body soared into the air before it, avoiding the dragon's claws. These three demon gods raised their huge dragon heads at the same time, looking towards the sky. Their powerful dragon claws shook, and their dragon bodies rose up, forming a pincer attack to surround Qin Hao. In an instant, the sky of the western divine region turned into a spectacular sea of fire, and there were human figures and dragon figures fighting fiercely in the sea of fire. At this moment, countless cultivators on the streets were shocked by this scene. They looked at the silver-haired figure in the sky who was flipping and moving in the sea of fire, and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Who is that? Someone trembled in fear and said, Who dares to provoke the grandson of City Lord Seacone, young Master C? I'm not sure, but this person is really powerful. Facing the 3 demon dragons of Seekong City, he was able to deal with them so easily. He's not an ordinary heaven wheel expert. The person next to him evaluated. Many people nodded in succession. Fighting 1 against 3, he didn't seem to be at a disadvantage at all. The silver-haired man's figure was light, and his footsteps were ghostly. He shuttled through the net of attacks of the 3 demon gods with ease, as if he was playing with them. However, even if this person's ability wasn't ordinary, after offending City Lord Seekong, he wouldn't be able to leave safely. Is it someone from the Kunlun Sea? At this moment, a group of figures stepped out from the mansion. Although they were far away from where Qin Hao was fighting the 3 demon gods, the scene of the divine path exploding was extremely eye-catching, and they still saw it at a glance. The demon dragons of the Seekong family. Deacon Shui said with a serious expression, and then a smile appeared on his face. These 3 demon dragons were won by Daesekong from the law battle of the Jinlong world. They were kept in Seekong City and became his precious grandson's demon slaves. From the looks of it, the people of the Kunlun Sea had offended the little ancestor of the Seekong family. Father, should we? Deacon was about to speak. Young Master C was born fearless, and he was truly the little tyrant of the Western Divine Region. As long as he was in the infinite Divine Region, there was nothing he didn't dare to do. He even dared to provoke the direct descendants of the top forces of the Eastern Divine Region, Southern Divine Region, and Northern Divine Region. Now that he had run into this little tyrant of the Kunlun Sea, he was bound to suffer. He wanted to remind his son if he should go and help him. Don't worry about it. Let's go to the academy, his son said indifferently. Although his son had been taken in as a sword attendant by Deacon Shui, he still needed to register at the academy. As long as he could enter the academy, Hekan's future was limitless. As for the Kunlun Sea and young Master C, what did it have to do with his son? After a glance, the person who walked out of the He Mansion left immediately. It was as if Zine had never visited the He Mansion. At the edge of West Capital City, draconic roars shook the earth, and a sea of flames roiled. Countless tongues of flame fell from the sky and smashed into the streets below. Qin Hao used the fleet-foot step to skillfully circle around the 3 demonic dragons. It wasn't that he was afraid of losing, it was just that he didn't want to fight. In fact, Qin Hao knew that the young man with the bird's nest hair was no ordinary person. If he hurt his dragon, the consequences would be difficult to deal with. But at the same time, it was because of this that he wanted to show off in front of the young man. They had traveled all the way from the Heaven Wall domain. In order to help Wuk forge the heavenly wheel, they had come to this unfamiliar Avicii divine domain. And the actions of Supreme Crane had undoubtedly poured a bucket of cold water on them. Now that they had no one to rely on and no place to stay, they might as well take the unconventional path and take the initiative to provoke a big shot and attract the attention of the other party. Coincidentally, the appearance of the man with the bird's nest hair gave Qin Hao an opportunity. He didn't mean to offend him, he just wanted to use this opportunity to show off his worth. He believed that with his and Wuk's abilities, even the infinite divine region, which was full of geniuses, wouldn't be able to suppress their sharpness. He just needed to wait for an expert to recognize the value of his and Wuk's abilities. In fact, Qin Hao had indeed achieved his goal. The young man driving the broken chariot was extremely angry. He slowly realized that Qin Hao seemed to be a little interesting. He was fighting with his 3 demonic dragons, and yet he was still so relaxed. Interesting. Young Master C looked at the sky, his eyes flashing. In the divine region, heavenly will experts were nothing strange. However, there was no one who could fight 3 of them. Even if there was, they couldn't compare to Qin Hao, who could only defend and not attack, yet remain undefeated. What did this mean? Young Master C was indeed spoiled and arrogant, but he wasn't stupid at all. On the contrary, he was born in one of the most powerful families in the divine region and had seen many scenes. He was able to conclude that the silver-haired man's actual combat strength was definitely far superior to any of the demonic dragons. In a one-on-one fight, his dragons wouldn't be enough. By the same logic, even if Qin Hao were to fight against a god-level expert in the divine region, he would still be confident and at ease. Grandfather said that at the heavenly wheel level, only those with 3 meridians and above can completely suppress the opponent, unless the heavenly wheel's grade is extremely high. What grade is this guy's heavenly wheel? Young Master C looked at the battle in the sky, his fingers scratching his chin as he fell into deep thought. Qin Hao hadn't revealed his heavenly wheel yet, so naturally, he couldn't see through it. This made him even more curious. After fighting for a long time, Qin Hao was bored and said arrogantly to the 3 demonic dragons, "Back down. You guys are no match for me. Get someone stronger." Arrogant. Human cultivator, take a blow from us 3 brothers. The 3 demonic dragons couldn't help but be angry that they were looked down upon. After flying for a long time, their strong dragon bodies slowly descended and stepped on the tall building below. Their sharp dragon claws broke the roof. At this time, the demonic dragons' bodies in different positions glowed with the light of the heavenly wheel. For a moment, the dragon might in the void flourished. It was as if the 3 divine wills had merged, giving birth to an even larger divine dragon phantom that stood in front of Qin Hao. Dragon will divine technique. Qin Hao looked a little serious. It was rare to see a divine technique that could merge the divine wills of heavenly wheel and combine them together. Its power should be extraordinary. Chapter 2034. Wisps of divine flames circled around his body as he activated the art of reincarnation. Qin Hao's aura was suffused with an almost undetectable draconic intent. At this moment, the divine dragon projection outside the West capital was growing larger and larger. Its body was over 3,000 meters long, and its might was crushing down upon heaven and earth. The wills of the 3 demonic dragons continued to converge on the massive projection, making it appear more and more substantial. It was as if a body of flesh and blood had been forged. Roar! An earth-shattering roar rang out. The 3 demonic dragons' wills were connected, and their souls seemed to have been poured into the massive projection. They roared at Qin Hao with an incomparably turbulent sound wave that transformed into a terrifying hurricane that swept through heaven and earth. Instantly, the flames wreaked havoc, and the void was burned through, revealing a series of black holes. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. Can he block it? Tai Chu's expression was filled with deep concern. It was true that the 3 demonic dragons had only just reached the divine Tao, but they were still at the divine Tao level. The divine will of Tianlun combined into one was extremely powerful, and ordinary Tianlun definitely wouldn't be able to block it. Even 2 meridian divine sigils would find it difficult to block it. Don't judge Chu San as a normal person. The Tao of the sword and the spatial will of the seamless realm won't be able to suppress his Tianlun. He's not in the same situation as us. Xin wasn't worried at all. If the newly minted god of Kunlun was defeated by the 3 demonic dragons, then it could only be said that he had misjudged Chu San. Boom! The terrifying flaming hurricane swept towards Qin Hao. Even from very far away, Qin Hao could sense that terrifying heat. A faint scorching sensation appeared on his face, and streams of divine flames began to quickly revolve around his body. They moved faster and faster, enveloping his entire body and forming a red barrier. Outside the West capital, countless cultivators were hiding in the corners of the streets and looking up at the sky. Their hearts were trembling violently. The flaming hurricane was incomparably massive. Would the silver-haired man be able to withstand it? Xiaohan, Wuk, and the others' palms were covered in a thin layer of sweat, and their hearts were beating at a much faster rate. They were also rather worried. Young Master C, who was standing on the ground, had a look of intense interest in his eyes. He stared intently, as if he was afraid that he would miss something. In his heart, he thought that if Qin Hao could take this blow and not die, he would be merciful and not care about the blasphemy the other had committed. However, he had to detain this person and keep him by his side as a hired thug. Boom! Crack! The terrifying hurricane collided with the tiny figures, as if it had struck everyone's heart. The scene was incomparably intense. Everyone saw that Qin Hao was like a red egg that had fallen into a river of molten lava. Facing the impact of the flames that could melt divine metal, he remained unmoved. However, it was only an instant before he was immediately swallowed up by the surging hurricane. Sigh, it's over. Another life. The crowd hiding in the corners of the street shook their heads and sighed. While they sympathized with him, they also felt hatred and fear towards the Seacone clan's little overlord. In the grand, seamless divine region, unless it was the leader of those major powers, there was almost no one the little overlord didn't dare to provoke. Many lives and treasures have been destroyed in his hands, but the divine master didn't care. There was nothing he could do about it. He was Daisakong's grandson, so he could be considered a direct descendant of the divine master. Boring. Young master, he shook his head as he watched the lava divine river gradually disappear. At this moment, he had also lost track of Qin Hao's aura. He was slightly disappointed. He thought that the silver-haired man was amazing, but he overestimated him and died. Hey, he's with you, right? It's his bad luck that his cultivation is not good enough. Young master, got into the crooked chariot and flipped it over a few times. He found a few divine crystals and threw them to Zien and the others. This is Divine Master Tai. Chu reached out to catch them. Suddenly, a powerful energy fluctuation came from his palm and reached his divine soul. Even his hands were trembling. Wuk, an illusion elder, looked at the divine crystals in Tai Chu's hand. Their eyes flashed with surprise. Such strong power of the sword way and the power of space. Thank you for your kindness, young master. I'll accept it. We'll accept it, Zien said with a smile. The divine power in these divine crystals was extremely strong. It was obvious that they had an extraordinary origin. The people around you are dead. It seems that you are not. Young Master C was about to speak when his expression suddenly changed. Young Master C, be careful. Deafening sounds rang out from 3 different directions at the same time. The 3 dragons raised by the Seacone clan all flew toward young Master C as if they were fighting for their lives. Young Master C's legs trembled slightly. Feeling the aura behind him, he slowly turned around and saw a face not long ago. You're not dead yet. Shock mixed with a faint panic. These 2 emotions were vividly displayed on young Master C's face. He was not afraid, but when did Qin Hao come his side? He did not sense it at all. The 3 dragons also did not sense it. Yes, I was born with a tough life. No one could take it away. Qin Hao stretched out his big hand, grabbed young Master C's neck, and lifted him up. Stop it quickly. The 3 dragons flew over and saw this scene. They immediately stopped halfway and did not dare to move forward. You dare to hurt me. Let go. I'm going to suffocate. Young Master C held onto Qin Hao's wrist with both hands. His legs kicked wildly, unable to exert any strength. How can you be so reckless in broad daylight in the divine realm? You don't care about your family, right? Fine, I'll do it. With one hand, Qin Hao tore off the already tattered armor from young Master C's body. My heroic divine armor. Suffocation was not important. Having his clothes ripped off was simply asking for young Master C's life. He grabbed Qin Hao's wrist with one hand and made a futile struggle. His other hand toward his face. His eyes were like torches as he gritted his teeth. He looked at Qin Hao as if he was the enemy who had killed his father. How can this piece of scrap metal be called a divine armor? Who gave you the courage to come here? Tearing off the armor was not enough. Qin Hao also tore off young Master C's underwear and even his pants. This scene shocked everyone into an uproar. Take off my pants. Someone come quickly. Why aren't you holding him down? Young Master C wanted to cry, but had no tears. He was completely naked except for his boxer shorts, the red of which was especially eye-catching. Gradually, his anger turned into grief and indignation, which turned into humiliation. He was the little overlord of the Western Divine Region. When had he ever been treated like this? If the young masters of the Eastern Divine Region, Southern Divine Region, and Northern Divine Region found out about this, he would be too ashamed to face them. Qin Hao didn't care about any of this. He pressed the young man against the war chariot, pressed down on his head, and gave him a violent beating. The sound of slaps mixed with the miserable screams of the Western Divine Region's little overlord filled the streets. When the three dragons saw this, they were stunned and did not know what to do for a moment. Moreover, they felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure in their hearts. "Take off my pants. You and I cannot live under the same sky. If you don't stop, I will scream for help. Quickly stop, you. Big brother, I was wrong. Please let me go." The screams turned into cries of pain, and the cries turned into begging for mercy. To the little overlord of the Western Divine Region, this day was branded into his soul, and he could not bear to look back. Zine and the rest laughed loudly. The cultivators on the streets stood up, and gradually, many heavenly wheel experts appeared in the sky. However, when they saw the little overlord of the Western Divine Region sobbing under the slaps of others, not a single person stopped him. Instead, they were laughing and commenting. "Satisfying. Even the little overlord has such a day. I wonder who that hero is." "He is the grandson of Daisakong who went berserk on the streets, huh?" Loud laughter shook the sky. Young Master C, who was crying bitterly, felt that it was especially ear-piercing. He had never felt like this before. It was as if he had been abandoned by the world. Outside the Western capital, he, young Master C, was being violently beaten up, but he could not find anyone to help him. On the contrary, this scene was something that everyone had been waiting for many years. "Grandfather, grandfather, quickly come and save me." A deep sense of powerlessness dominated young Master C's soul. He had never felt so helpless before. The only thing he could do was to call for the old man who was born to dote on him like a god, the pillar of the Western Divine Region, Daisakong. Enough! A shout that had been suppressed for a long time resounded through the air. As if it had some kind of magic power, it interrupted Qin Hao's slap. In an instant, an incomparably vast, divine pressure descended from the sky. Qin Hao raised his head and saw an incomparably dignified face with a white beard appear high in the sky. Lord Sikong. Tens of thousands of cultivators simultaneously bowed to the face that had appeared. Those heavenly wheel experts standing on the roofs of the buildings also slightly bowed to Daisakong. Qin Hao was slightly shocked. The guy under his palm was indeed of extraordinary origin. He was actually the son of the Western capital, Daisakong's grandson. At this moment, Qin Hao looked at City Lord Sikong's face and replied, "Enough? Even if Senior's grandson runs amok, if Junior's strength was not enough, wouldn't I have lost my life?" Daisakong had long been aware of the situation here, but he had not shown himself. Now that Qin Hao had beaten up his grandson, what if the other party came out and was not a match for him? "Humph, how I raised my grandson is not up to you to talk about." A glaring light flashed in the eyes of the dignified face with a white beard. A powerful will fell on Qin Hao's body. Qin Hao suddenly felt that his hand did not listen to him. His 5 fingers loosened, and he actually let go of the youth under his palm. "Bastard." Young Master C's face was filled with tears of humiliation. The second after he pulled up his pants, he slapped Qin Hao. However, he did not get what he wanted. Zine's figure flashed and stood between the two of them, so this slap landed squarely on Zine's body. "Satisfied?" Zine said with a smile on his face. He did not care, but Qin Hao did not feel good in his heart. Young Master C's face was filled with anger. Today's humiliation was not something that could be satisfied with just a slap. Without another word, he raised the divine spear under his feet and stabbed toward Zine. Seems like the lesson was not enough. Qin Hao's heart was also filled with anger. Zine regarded him as his junior brother, and his senior brother took the slap. However, Zine still did not repent. With the arrival of the senior, his arrogance only increased. Qin Hao moved forward with a fleet-foot stride, and his golden finger directly pierced towards the divine spear in young Master C's hand. However, at this time, another powerful divine will descended and crushed Qin Hao's body. The power was so strong that Qin Hao stopped in his tracks and froze for a few seconds. "Senior Sikong, you've gone too far," Zine said. He lifted Qin Hao's shoulder, and the two of them retreated, avoiding young Master C's attack. "Gone too far. The dignified, white-bearded face said coldly. Divine light flashed in his eyes, and two dazzling sword lights shot out. Seeing this, Chi-Zu and Chu-Zu jumped up. The two of them slapped out at the same time, and a beam of divine fire collided with the sword lights. Then, the sharp light pierced through the divine fire of the two ancestral patriarchs of Kunlun without any hindrance, as if it was cutting through bamboo. It made a whistling sound and went straight for the ancestral patriarchs. Dodge! Chi-Zu was shocked. He dodged to the side at the same time with Chu-Zu. The two sides had tested each other's strength as soon as they exchanged blows. Chapter 2035. Daisakong's sword was very strong. Although the Qi and Chu ancestors did not use their full strength, they could clearly feel that they were no match for him. As the two dodged to the side, the sword light flew forward unstoppably. Seeing this, Zine formed several seals with his hands. The divine light of the heavenly wheel suddenly flashed on his body, and his divine power extended like meridians. Unfortunately, it could not cover all parts of his body. Great heavenly wheel, Qinhao said. Zine could not perfectly inherit the mantle of the supreme venerable. He had only forged a saint-grade heavenly wheel, which was the same grade as the ancestors of the three great families in Kunlun. However, the strength of Ziyin's will was clearly stronger than that of the three patriarchs. The Kunlun Sea was refined by his father's will. Back then, when he battled Patriarch Lin, he had the advantage of the heavenly Tao. Moreover, he had the assistance of the Flower Empress, which allowed him to crush Patriarch Lin and give others a sense of dominance. Go! Zine spat out a deep shout. He slapped his palms forward, and the green divine power condensed into two solid mountain sea stones. They were like two heavy punches that smashed into Daisakong's sword will. Bang bang! Two explosions sounded. The mountain sea stones shattered, and the sword will collapsed. Zine seemed to have suffered a strong impact. He stepped back and barely managed to stand firm. He felt that his inner palace was overturned. As expected of a four-vein heavenly wheel expert, Zine said solemnly. The white-bearded face that appeared in the void was merely a wisp of Sikong the Great's will. It was not his true self. Even so, he was no match for his opponent. Even if he was not suppressed by the heavenly path of the deity realm, Zine would not be able to win. Qinhao felt a ripple in his heart. The foundation of cultivation was indeed very important to the heavenly wheel. Daisakong's divine power was profound, and the grade of his heavenly wheel was not below that of his senior brother. Thinking of this, Qinhao's body flowed with brilliance, and a layer of light faintly appeared. This old man is very strong. Don't be impulsive. Zine shook his head at Qinhao and opened his mouth to stop him. Qinhao's sky wheel was too prominent and should not be exposed so easily. What's wrong? Are you at your wit's end? Continue to resist? Young Master C couldn't help but become arrogant when he saw that his grandfather was so awe-inspiring and easily suppressed three heavenly wheel realm cultivators. Senior Sikong, we came from the celestial oyster realm to borrow the seamless divine domain's heavenly Tao sword intent. We didn't intentionally come into conflict with young Master C. Zine explained, I don't care where you're from. If I don't punish you for what you did today, you're not Daisakong of the celestial realm. Men, take them all back to the western capital, City Lord Sikong said in a dignified tone before disappearing. Soon after, a group of figures appeared here. They were all uniformed, and they were all West Capital City guards with immortal swords on their backs. The auras they gave off were extremely cold, and the two people leading the group had divine light flowing around their bodies. Everyone, come with us to West Capital City, one of them said. Zine and the others exchanged glances, and they all let go of their resistance. They were surrounded by the West Capital City guards, and they flew towards Sikong City. Young Master C raised his head proudly, as if he were showing off to the others. He raised his divine spear and followed along. The three demonic dragons righted the overturned carriage and pulled it back. Soon, peace returned to this place. If it weren't for the massive scars left behind, It would be as if a battle had never taken place. The Western Capital, also known as the Western Divine Sky, was the territory overseen by Daisakong of the Celestial Realm. Daisakong's lineage had an extremely deep relationship with the Seamless Divine Master. It was said that when the Seamless Academy was first established, the current Seacone was already a follower of the Seamless Sword God and was the Divine Master's loyal servant. Later on, the Seamless Sword God's heavenly wheel changed, and he became a Divine Master and established the Seamless Sword Realm. After that, he ordered Seacone to leave and cultivate on his own. After Seacone left the Seamless Academy, he took root in the Western Divine region and built Seacone City. He made a name for himself, but his relationship with the Seamless Sword God never grew distant. In fact, he even sent his son to the Seamless Academy to continue managing the orthodoxy for his master. Right now, the son of City Lord Seacone was a high-ranking member of the Academy, and his cultivation was extremely high. However, his youngest grandson, young Master C, was born with a very high status, and he often caused trouble and caused others to worry. Daisakong was also having a headache over this. Since his son was in charge of the academy, he didn't have much time to discipline him. Daisakong also doted on his grandson a lot, so he ended up with an arrogant and unreasonable personality. His grandson had caused a lot of trouble and caused the entire divine region to be in chaos. There was no cultivator who didn't fear him, but every time he caused trouble, Daisakong would personally take the blame. He would apologize and make up for it with a lot of money. In short, he didn't let the victims suffer. Divine Master Seamless naturally knew about this, but considering his relationship with Seacone, he chose to turn a blind eye. Moreover, in the divine region, the little overlord of the Seacone family couldn't cause any big trouble. When Qin Hao and his group arrived at the Western Capital and landed in Seacone City, they were immediately shocked by the majestic city. As far as the eye could see, there were magnificent palaces and magnificent buildings. It was luxurious and looked like a real city of gods. Compared to the Kunlun Sea, Seacone City was many times more noble. Of course, it also lacked the celestial aura of the Kunlun Sea. Daisakong, I've brought them. Outside the Seacone Hall, the Western Capital's guards escorted the people of the Kunlun Sea to this place. The Heavenly Wheel expert leading them bowed to the hall. Let them in. A dignified and deep voice resounded from the hall. Then, the expert leading the guards made a pleased gesture to Zine's group. Zine's group helplessly stepped into the hall. Greetings, Daisakong. Everyone bowed to the person above them. At this moment, a figure stood at the very end of the hall. He had one hand behind his back, and the other hand was holding an ancient book. He was reading it with great interest. Speak. How should I punish you? Daisakong asked. His back was facing the people below the hall. His voice was very calm. Senior Seacone, you can't blame us for this matter, right? Qin Hao asked. The old man's divine will was so strong that he should know what happened outside the Western Capital. Yes, I don't blame you. However, you stripped Si Huan's clothes and humiliated him in front of everyone. Have you ever considered the old man's face? Seacone said in a low voice. He slowly turned around. His white beard and long hair were tied together into a braid that hung down his back. His face was as dignified as it had been outside the city. But Qin Hao still wanted to argue. Daisakong said, I don't care who you are. Once you're in the seamless divine domain, you have to follow the rules here. These are the laws of the great desolate world. Even if the heavenly Ho God comes and sees you beating up my grandson, he won't be able to say anything. We'll let Daisakong deal with it. Zine said directly. You got some backbone. Fine. Daisakong chuckled. He shouted toward the outside of the hall. Take them to the dungeon first. I'll think about it before I deal with them. Yes. The sound of footsteps could be heard. A group of West Capital guards walked into the hall. When Zine's group saw this, they silently followed the West Capital guards out. Si Huan, get the hell in here. Daisakong roared. At this moment, as Qin Hao and the others were taken away, young Master Si, whose clothes were disheveled, dragged his broken armor into the hall with his head lowered. He came to Seacone 1 and said, Grandpa, I was wrong. Daisakong looked surprised. Did he just admit it? I'm a disappointment. I've embarrassed you and the Divine Master great-grandfather. I'll work hard in the future and try to reach the divine level as soon as possible. Then I'll beat up everyone in the divine domain, including the Eastern Immortal Sky, the Big Dipper Mountain, and the Southern College. Speaking of which, you can't blame me for what happened today. You put such a strong restriction on the divine artifacts. How could I unleash their power? Can you blame me? Young Master C raised his head. Then it's my fault, you little brat. Daisakong was furious. He lightly hit young Master C's head with the ancient book in his hand. He didn't care if young Master C dodged. He sighed and said, "Tell me, what do you want to do with those people? I don't care about the others, but I can't let that one off so easily." Young Master C was furious. Kill him? Daisakong's eyes darkened. No, no, no. It's a pity to kill him. It's too easy for him. Let's trap them for a while. I'll think of a way to control him. Young Master C smiled slyly. Do as you wish. Daisakong turned his back. He read his book and muttered to himself. He also felt that it was a pity to kill Qin Hao. It seemed that the young man's talent was good. However, he couldn't unleash his full strength in the battle with the three-headed demon dragon. You should find a time to try again. Perhaps he could be a useful talent. Young Master C rubbed his nose happily and turned to leave. Since his grandfather had agreed, then Qin Hao's life was in his hands. He didn't believe that his grandfather wouldn't agree when the time came. Dungeon. It was cold and damp. Qin Hao and the others were imprisoned here. The fence that trapped them was made of divine iron. Moreover, the space outside the fence was filled with dense sword light. The divine intent that these sword light emitted was extremely powerful. Any one of them wasn't something that Tian Luan could easily withstand. The Seikong clan's dungeon is much more powerful than the Kunlun Sea. Zine sat on the ground. Everyone around him was meditating. Although the conditions in the dungeon weren't good, fortunately, the 12 of them didn't separate. Senior brother, how will Daisakong deal with us? Qin Hao asked. How would I know? Zine glared at Qin Hao with a resentful expression. It was all Qin Hao's fault. He had told him not to show off. Great. Now he was trapped in the dungeon. No matter how they deal with us, they don't have the right to decide the life and death of the Kunlun Sea. Chizu said. The Kunlun Sea was different from the other heavenly Daos. Because of the exalted, the heavenly king deity paid special attention to it. Once he knew that they were trapped by the Seamless Realm, he would definitely come to rescue them. We are indeed people of the Kunlun Sea, but it seems that you aren't. Qin Hao said to Chizu. Chizu couldn't help but tremble. He smiled apologetically and said, I serve the Kunlun deity as my master. How can I not be considered a person of the Kunlun Sea? You can't abandon me. Look at your dog face. Chizu glanced at Chizu. How disgusting. Your dog face isn't any better than mine. Chizu coldly snorted and turned his head to the side. This Chu clan was really cowardly. Why didn't they dare to go all the way? Back then, if it wasn't for the fact that the Qi clan was blind and colluded with Lin Du, if it was Chizu standing in the Chu clan's position, he would definitely fight to the end. I still don't know how long they will lock us up for. Let's cultivate. Zine said as he slowly closed his eyes. Spots of divine light flowed around his body. He could feel that the wool pressing down on him was getting stronger and stronger. Because they had not gone to the heavenly tone pavilion, they could only rely on their cultivation to resist the suppression of the heavenly might of the infinite divine realm. Otherwise, their strength would continue to decline, and the consequences would be very serious. Chapter 2036. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The people of Kunlun Sea were trapped in the dungeon of the sea capital. Other than cultivating, they could do nothing else. During this time, the sea capital did not send anyone to check on them. It was as if they had ignored their existence and left them to their own devices. At this moment, Zine and the others were meditating in the cold and damp dungeon. Their faces were pale, and their bodies were flowing with spots of divine light. It was as if they were isolated from space, forming a divine barrier to resist the sword will of the seamless heavenly Tao. Qin Hao, Xiao Han, Wuk, and Illusion Sovereign were in a much better situation. They were all proficient in the way of the sword. Moreover, they had the power of the original realm, so the influence was not very obvious. Especially Illusion Sovereign. He even let go of himself and allowed the spatial will of the heavenly Tao to suppress him. He used the pressure of the heavenly Tao to cultivate. He realized that the spatial will of the seamless world was not much weaker than that of the Dongwang world. Cultivating here was like a fish in water. It was extremely comfortable. However, Zine and the others were not in a good situation. A cold wind blew in the dungeon. Qin Hao looked silently and saw that Zine's meditating body was trembling slightly. He could not help but worry. The pressure of the heavenly Tao would become stronger and stronger. The heavenly wheel would not be able to resist it. If this continued, their bodies and souls would not be able to take it. Qin Hao had also thought of using the perfect heavenly wheel to communicate with the seamless heavenly Tao to relieve the pressure on Zine and the others. However, this idea was rejected by Zine on the spot. Now that they were in the seamless world, they were very far away from the Tianho divine world. People's hearts were unpredictable, and they had to hide a little. Daisakong was very shrewd, and it was difficult to distinguish between good and evil. If Qin Hao released the heavenly wheel to resonate with the heavenly Tao, he would definitely notice it. No one could predict what the outcome would be. Senior Sikong, you imprisoned us here and ignored us. Now, my senior brother's body is very weak. He urgently needs to go to the Heavenly Book Pavilion. I hope that Senior can let us go. Qin Hao stood up and shouted towards the outside of the prison. The sound spread out, and in the dungeon, there was a dense rhythm of sword sounds. In an instant, the sword wheels floating in the space outside the dungeon pointed at Qin Hao, as if he would be pierced by thousands of swords if he moved even a little. The sword intent outside the prison can sense the changes in our emotions. Sit down, Zine said with a weak breath. His lips were dry and cracked. When a martial artist entered the path of martial arts and transcended the mortal world, he could enter the state of Anidia. There was no need for him to consume food in the mortal world. When he reached the divine level, he did not need to do so. As long as his divine source was not destroyed, his divine power would be able to maintain his youth forever. For Zine to undergo such a change, it was obvious that the pressure he was enduring from the heavenly Tao was very strong. His divine power could not hold on for much longer. But if this continues, senior apprentice brothers, all of you will run out of divine sources. Qin Hao said. He was blaming himself in his heart. Perhaps he had done something wrong. The Sikong Temple is reinforced by divine power. No matter how loud you shout, my grandfather can't hear you. Why don't you beg me instead? At this moment, there was a playful laughter. The young master of Sikong City, young Master C, held his head high and his hands behind his back. He swaggered into the dungeon. The sword wheels floating in the space moved aside and made a path for him. Beg you. Qin Hao glanced at young Master C coldly. Will you let us go? It was not that simple. Maybe. Why don't you try kneeling down and begging me? As long as your attitude is good, I can consider it. Young Master C smiled. He has never had the habit of kneeling in his life. Don't look at me. I don't either. Wuk said with his eyes closed. It's okay. Habits are formed slowly. Young Master C looked around the dungeon and swept his gaze across everyone in Kunlun Sea, as if encouraging them to kneel. Unfortunately, no one responded. Even Chu Zhu and Chizu looked at him coldly and closed their eyes again. They had stepped into the celestial wheel realm and cultivated for more than 10,000 years. They were the ancestors of the Kunlun aristocratic families. No matter what, they could not bow down to an unblemished brat. You're quite stubborn. Okay, then you can continue to stay here. Let's see who gives up first. Young Master C's face was filled with strong dissatisfaction. He turned around and left angrily. Wait, Qin Hao said. Hearing this, young Master C immediately stopped. He turned around and smiled. Have you changed your mind? It's impossible to kneel. You can state other conditions. Qin Hao said. Daisakong said that he would punish them, but he only imprisoned them. If he really intended to punish them severely, it would not take so long. This meant that he did not mean to punish them at all. Let me think about it. Young Master C scratched his chin and raised his head with a thoughtful expression. Then his eyes flashed. He smiled slyly at Qin Hao. That day, I saw that your cultivation was not bad. How much strength did you use when you fought with the three-headed demon dragon? Less than 10%. Qin Hao said frankly. Young Master C pursed his lips. You're exaggerating. You're more capable than me. What do you think, young Master C? Qin Hao asked. How would I know? Young Master C replied. He was not a roundworm in Qin Hao's stomach. How about this? Let me out to test it out. If I can defeat the 3 demon immortals of your residence in one move, can young Master C speak up for us and ask Daisakong to release everyone from the dungeon? Qin Hao said. That's a good idea. Sure. Young Master C nodded. Qin Hao pointed at the cell and the sword intent floating outside the cell. Let him out. Young Master C shouted. Whoosh. As his voice fell, the bars made of divine iron slowly rose. The flashing sword light outside began to tremble restlessly. Although it did not attack Qin Hao, it maintained an attacking posture to prevent Zine and the others from escaping. Don't stare at the sword intent. Follow me, young Master C said. Qin Hao, Xiao Han, and the others exchanged glances before stepping out and following young Master C. They avoided the sword intent floating outside the cell and ignored it with their telekinesis. As long as they did not pay too much attention, the sword intent outside the cell would not be hostile. Of course, the main reason was that young Master C was present. Soon, the two stepped out of the dark and damp dungeon. Qin Hao saw the light again. The warm light shone on his body, making him feel exceptionally comfortable. Even his soul had a warm and comfortable feeling. Outside the cell, there were several guards from Seekong City. Their auras were relatively strong, and they were even stronger than the leader of the guards who had escorted them back to the city. It could be seen that Seekong City was full of experts. Even Heavenly Wheel experts like this were not few in number in the entire Divine Realm. After all, this was the core of a large world and the lifeline of hundreds of planes surrounding it. If the Divine Wilderness had not been invaded by the foreign army and the Yuanling era had not ended, I wonder if it would have developed into the seamless Divine Domain. Qin Hao sighed. During the Yuanling era, there were more than 20 Heavenly Wheel experts in the Divine Wilderness. According to their Heavenly Wheel grades, the strongest representative of these 20 people, Yin Ming, was indeed qualified to become a Divine Master and even the Divine King of the original domain. In that case, the Divine Wilderness would definitely be like the Seamless Academy, expanding infinitely and giving birth to many planes. Thus, millions of emperors would have the opportunity to advance to the divine path and become the second seamless divine domain, or even surpass the scale of the seamless divine domain. It was a pity that such a great era had sadly fallen. Young Master C, why did you bring me here? Qin Hao looked puzzled as he followed young Master C forward. Their current location was not some training hall, but an extremely unique palace in the city. It seemed to be young Master C's personal territory. As for your abilities, I'm well aware of them. Let's not talk about whether you used 10% or 20% of your power back then. In short, if you were to fight one-on-one, those 3 dragons would definitely not be your match. You wouldn't even have a chance to get close to them. Young Master C sat on a rock in the palace and took out a fruit pit from his pocket and ate it with relish. Qin Hao's brows knitted slightly. So, I don't doubt your ability. Show me a few moves. For example, the miraculous shadowless ghost movement technique you executed that day. If I'm satisfied, I'll beg Grandfather to release your companions. Young Master C crossed his legs. Okay. Qin Hao understood now. He executed the Fleetfoot steps without using a trace of Dao insight. His movement technique floated past young Master C's eyes, sometimes swift like the wind, sometimes shaking like the waves. It contained a feeling of crushing heaven's might, and it was boundlessly profound. Young Master C gradually became enthralled and completely forgot about the fruit pit in his palm. His expression and movements froze, and he couldn't take his eyes off it. He realized that even though Qin Hao didn't use a trace of Dao Insight's divine power, his footsteps were extremely exquisite. He could completely immerse himself in it and imagine the spectacular scene after Qin Hao used his divine power. Wonderful, truly wonderful. After images flew past his eyes, and young Master C was full of praise. At this time, he couldn't catch Qin Hao's aura at all, and he couldn't tell which shadow was the real body. Without using Dao Insight's divine power, Qin Hao is already so powerful. One could imagine what kind of scene it would be if Qin Hao released Tianlin and poured his divine power into his movement technique. Thinking of this, young Master C's eyes flickered more and more as if he had discovered a treasure. He said, "Stop." Hum. As if a gust of wind had stopped in front of him, Qin Hao appeared in front of young Master C and said, satisfied, "Ahem, although it's not as powerful as our Seacon clan's divine technique, it's barely enough." Young Master C said, "If that's the case, can young Master C plead with Senior Seacon?" Qin Hao was concerned about the situation of Zine and the others. Young Master C shook his head. "Your performance has indeed met my expectations, but why should I help you? Speak frankly, what exactly do you want?" Qin Hao said, "Be my fighter and stay by my side. Do whatever I ask you to do." Young Master C stood up from the stone and said seriously, "In other words, I'll be responsible for bringing you around freely?" Qin Hao said, "That's the effect." Young Master C laughed. "I don't like being someone's subordinate." Qin Hao refused. Young Master C's laughter stopped, and the corner of his mouth twitched a few times. "You can acknowledge me as your big brother. In the future, I'll protect you in the seamless divine territory. Are you sure?" The corner of Qin Hao's mouth rose. "You look quite ruthless, but why are you so wishy-washy? To tell you the truth, I've lived for so long and have yet to have a true brother. They're not worthy. As long as you're of one heart with me, I'll repay you tenfold. No, 20-fold. Young Master C promised loudly. "All right, big brother, please accept a bow from me." Qin Hao cupped his fists and said, "I'm Li Chuji. In the future, I'll rely on big brother young Master C to take care of the seamless divine territory. Young Master C is what the people of the divine territory call me. My name is Si Huan." "Ha. Good brother." Si Huan raised his hand and patted Qin Hao's shoulder happily. "Big brother, you guys, my senior brothers are still in the dungeon." Qin Hao hesitated. Si Huan rolled his eyes and said, "To tell you the truth, brother, I've never had my pants pulled out and beaten on the street in my life. You're the first. At that time, I was very angry, so I deliberately asked the old man to lock you guys in the dungeon. I know very well that you guys came from the outside world and can't withstand the will of the heavenly Tao in the seamless divine territory for too long. So, this is the current situation. Qin Hao is also a smart person. In 2 days, I'll go ask Grandpa to let you guys go. After all, I've said too many harsh words, so I need to go through the formalities. Come, let's go drink." Si Huan raised his arm and put it on Qin Hao's shoulder, walking toward a small building in the palace park. Because of their height, Si Huan was more than a head shorter than Qin Hao, so from the back, the two looked strange. Si Huan's walking posture was one side high and the other low, as if half of his body was hanging on Qin Hao's shoulder. It was quite indecent. Chapter 2037. After the farce, Si Huan had changed from enemies to brothers who followed her wherever she went. These days, no matter where she went, she would always bring Qin Hao with her. The change in her attitude could be said to be great, which subverted the eyes of the guards in the West Capital. This could be considered as friendship grows from an exchange of blows. However, it was hard to say whether the two of them, who seemed to be very close, really saw each other as brothers. A few days later, as promised, Si Huan pleaded with Daisakong and released Zine and the others from the dungeon. However, he still restricted their freedom of movement and locked them up in a courtyard in the Seacon residence. Guards were arranged to keep watch outside. Even so, the environment was much better than being locked up in the dungeon. "Senior brother," after a while, when I get closer to young Master C, I will ask him to remove the guards and bring you to the heavenly book pavilion. In the courtyard, Qin Hao looked at everyone who was meditating. Ziyan's condition did not improve after leaving the dungeon. The pressure from the will of heavenly Tao was becoming more and more obvious on everyone's body. Everyone's aura had weakened by close to 50%. It's okay, I can still hold on. You, on the other hand, are doing well in the Sikong residence. I heard the guards of the West Capital call you lordly. Your status is not bad. Ziyan looked up slightly and smiled weakly. In fact, this was a good thing. The closer Qin Hao was to the little overlord of the West Capital, the easier it would be for them to do things in the divine plane. It seemed that provoking Si Huan back then was effective. Qin Hao smiled and said, "As for the academy, with the little overlord's help, it should not be a problem for Wuk to get a chance to enter." Si Huan was quite famous in the divine plane. Even if they did not care about him, the Seamless Academy would also care about Daisakong. Moreover, Qin Hao had heard that Si Huan's parents were also working in the academy. It all depended on whether Wuk met the requirements. Qin Hao was very confident about this. I will work hard in my cultivation. Before I enter the academy, I will strive to strengthen my sword will of the laws. Wuk said. Qin Hao patted Wuk's shoulder in relief. Chu-san, come here quickly. At this moment, a weak voice called out. Qin Hao looked over and saw half a head peeking out from the wall of the courtyard. The person was extremely cautious, just like a thief. However, the person's curly red hair was extremely conspicuous, and Qin Hao immediately recognized him. Young Master C. Qin Hao was puzzled. Why was he so careful in his own residence? Why didn't he come in? You go first, Ziyan said. Young Master C must have something to do. Qin Hao nodded and glanced at Xiaohan. Xiaohan gestured for him not to worry about the situation here. Then, Qin Hao got up and walked out of the courtyard. Greetings, lordly. The 4 guards at the door took the initiative to talk. Brothers, thank you for protecting my senior brother. Thank you for your hard work. Qin Hao said, Not at all. It's my duty. The 4 guards smiled kindly. Qin Hao nodded in response and walked along the courtyard wall to the side. He saw Si Huan waiting there. Why did you come out from the main entrance? Si Huan asked anxiously. He quickly glanced around and found that he did not attract the attention of the guards in the residence. What's the matter? Why do you need to be so careful? Qin Hao asked curiously. Don't ask first. Follow me. Si Huan grabbed Qin Hao and ran. He deliberately took the small path to avoid the patrol team of the Sikong residence. When they returned to the Independent Palace, he pulled out a big box from under the bed in the room and opened it. Change your clothes. As he spoke, he changed into a set of clothes very quickly. Night clothes? Qin Hao looked at Si Huan's black clothes and was puzzled. What are you going to do? I'm going to take you to a good place. Don't tell anyone, especially my grandfather. Si Huan urged nervously. He pointed to the remaining set of clothes in the box. Change quickly. Qin Hao was speechless. He guessed that it was most likely not something good. However, since he had decided to be the brother of the little tyrant of the Western capital, he would naturally shoulder the burden together. Thus, he took off his jacket and put on the other set of night clothes in the box. When Qin Hao was dressed, his tall and well-proportioned body, coupled with his outstanding height, made his temperament much stronger than Si Huan's. He vaguely emitted a fierce aura. TSK, this temperament. Young Master C looked at Qin Hao with envy. His body was excellent. Where are we going? Qin Hao asked. Eastern Immortal Heaven. Si Huan said a name. The number 1 power in the Eastern Divine region. Qin Hao was surprised. That's right, good brother. Use your amazing phantom shadow movement skill and bring me along. Be careful not to leak your aura. I'll take you to broaden your horizons. Si Huan's face was full of excitement. All right, Qin Hao was helpless. Eastern Immortal Heaven was extremely far from the Western Divine region. One was at the easternmost part of the Divine region, while the other was at the westernmost part. They would pass by the core of the Divine region, this seamless academy. With such a long distance, not only would they have to cross the Divine region, there would also be countless heavenly will experts along the way. It would be extremely difficult to not be discovered. Qin Hao also did not have absolute confidence, but as long as they were careful, it should not be a big problem. Let's go. Qin Hao retracted his aura and only relied on his movement skill to move forward. He placed his hand on Si Huan's shoulder and carried him out. He turned into a pitch-black shadow and disappeared into the corner of the palace in the blink of an eye. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air and was nowhere to be found. After leaving Si Shaoyuan, Qin Hao walked along the water and avoided the patrols of the West capital along the back of the small street. He safely left Si Kong City and headed east, heading straight for the eastern deity sky of the infinite domain. The eastern immortal heaven was extremely large and had many disciples. Their overall strength was only above the western capital, but not below. Most importantly, the cultivators of the eastern immortal heaven were all women. It was rumored that the number one person in the eastern immortal heaven, the eastern victory immortal, was the number one person below the divine master realm. His heavenly wheel divine power was the strongest in the entire divine region. Qin Hao did not know why Si Huan was going to the eastern immortal heaven. According to the actions of the western capital's little overlord, it was definitely not something good. Therefore, Qin Hao was under a lot of pressure on this trip. After all, the eastern immortal heaven was guarded by an omnipotent expert from the divine region. Daisakong's strength was so strong that he could interfere with Qin Hao's divine soul and restrict the circulation of divine techniques and divine power with just a thought. Moreover, the Eastern Victory Immortal's cultivation was above Daisakong's. One could imagine how terrifying he was. Brother Chu San is amazing. With this speed, in the entire seamless divine region, other than the divine masters, there is no heavenly wheel expert who can catch up to you without activating his heavenly wheel divine power. Huge images flashed in front of Si Huan's eyes as the huge buildings in the divine region flew behind him. He felt that Qin Hao's movement skill had reached an indescribable level. He had never seen someone like Qin Hao in the seamless divine region. Brother Huan, just don't trick me. Qin Hao had a bad feeling in his heart. Don't worry, I've never done anything to trick my brothers. I'll only let my brothers enjoy. Si Huan guaranteed. I hope so. Qin Hao was unsure. The sword sun set in the western mountains. In the divine region, the glaring light gradually disappeared into the darkness. A black curtain that swallowed the sky covered everything. At this moment, Daisakong sat majestically in the western capital divine palace. He held a luminous pearl in his palm and looked at it with his bright eyes. Through the pearl's light, he could clearly see Qin Hao's shadow and location. Lord Sikong, this person's movement skill is incomparably mysterious. Just based on this move alone, he is indeed a talent. Beside him, an extremely majestic figure stood tall. It was the commander of the Western Capital's Imperial Guards, the first Heavenly Wheel expert, Zhang Ji. Of course, this first Heavenly Wheel expert had to throw Daisakong out of the picture in advance. At this moment, Zhang Ji was also looking at the luminous pearl. The more he looked, the more shocked he became. He felt a deep chill from Qin Hao's body. If he hadn't seen this movement skill with his own eyes, it would have only existed in his dreams. Zhang Ji knew very well that if they hadn't known about Si Huan's plan in advance and planted a divine imprint on Si Huan that could resonate with the divine concealment pearl, it would have been very difficult to discover that Qin Hao had already left the western divine region. This silver-haired youth was terrifying. From what I know, no one in the Kunlun Sea or the heavenly Ho divine region focuses on cultivating a divine movement skill. Where did this person come from? Old man Sikong looked puzzled. He had already investigated the identity of Zien and the others. They were the leaders of the heavenly Ho divine realm's Kunlun plane. Once upon a time, Kunlun was a place that couldn't be underestimated. Unfortunately, that famous alchemist of the desolate era had fallen. Daisakong was a loyal servant of the divine master of Avicii. He was very experienced and ruthless. There was almost nothing he couldn't take care of. His network of spies and connections was very large. Therefore, when he learned that Zien was the current sect master of the Kunlun Sea, he wasn't too surprised. Daisakong couldn't see through Qin Hao at all. You couldn't find out anything about his background. I wonder which forbidden area of the eastern immortal heaven young Master C will bring Li Chuji to. I'm looking forward to it, Zhang Xian said. Sihwan wasn't as bad as the outside world thought. In reality, Daisakong's grandson was very smart. He brought Li Chuji out to test him. I hope the trouble won't be too big. Daisakong sighed. Otherwise, he would be in trouble again. The change between day and night in the Avicii divine realm was much longer than in ordinary planes. Qin Hao and Si Huan didn't encounter any obstacles except for the time they wasted passing by the Seamless Academy. They easily slipped under the noses of a large number of heavenly wheel experts. According to the time in the divine wilderness, it took him about 2 days to reach the eastern divine region. However, the sky of the Avicii divine realm was still dark. Do you see the bright balls of light in front of us? That's the eastern immortal heaven. Be careful. Si Huan pointed in a direction. Clusters of sparks flickered in that area. They looked like stars in the night sky, especially sacred and conspicuous. Qin Hao slowed down a little and used his turtle aura to its limit. His body was almost completely devoid of human aura as he advanced toward the eastern immortal heaven with extra caution. Wisps of fiery patterns appeared on his eyelids. In this pitch-black night, he could clearly see the number 1 orthodoxy's sacred ground of the eastern divine region. Surrounded by mountains and ancient palaces, waterfalls from the 9th heaven rumbled. The entire Easter deity heaven was filled with beautiful mountains and beautiful waters. It was like a paradise on earth. Nothing more beautiful could be imagined. It was a residence of women, after all. Compared to the luxurious West capital city, this place was even more beautiful than the Kunlun Sea. Although the Kunlun Sea was also ethereal, it wasn't as realistic as the eastern immortal heaven. Where are we going? Qin Hao's voice entered Si Huan's ears through consciousness. They were currently in the eastern immortal heavens territory. They had come uninvited in the middle of the night and trespassed into the cultivation holy land of Fairy Maiden. They were no different from thieves. If they were discovered, their morals and character would be destroyed. Chapter 2038. Do you see that spirit waterfall? Let's go over there. Si Huan pointed in a direction in the night sky. There were many spirit waterfalls in the eastern deity sky. They were like silvery silk floating in the mountains. The spirit waterfall that Si Huan pointed to was located at an extremely high altitude, which was completely in the core of the eastern deity's sky. Qin Hao raised his guard and stepped lightly on the cliff with the fleet footsteps. He carried Si Huan and jumped between the mountain peaks. When his feet landed, there was almost no sound. The timing, distance, environment, and movement technique were all very accurate. The two of them did not attract anyone's attention as they moved forward. They gradually approached the spirit waterfall and climbed higher and higher. Qin Hao felt that the environment of the eastern deity sky was exceptionally cold. The higher they went, the faster the temperature dropped. Along the way, he saw that many spirit waterfalls were covered in ice, and water flowed continuously under the ice. This seemed to be a characteristic of the sect. It could also be related to the cultivation of the people of the eastern deity sky. When they got close to the tallest spirit waterfall, the bone-chilling cold attacked their bodies. Their blood and soul were corroded by the cold. Even their wills felt like they were being frozen. Qin Hao's limbs were slightly stiff, and his movements were not as good as before. His speed instantly slowed down. It's really cold. Si Huan's 2 rows of teeth chattered. His body trembled slightly under Qin Hao's palm. A warm current flowed in his heart and wrapped around his body, unknowingly resisting the cold that pervaded the entire eastern deity sky. If he had not prepared well before coming, he probably would not have been able to withstand it. The sound of flowing water could be heard clearly. On this extremely high altitude, the huge spirit waterfall was covered in ice that was 9 feet thick. It was extremely spectacular. And below the spirit waterfall was a cold pond. The laughter of women and the sound of them playing in the water was crisp and pleasant. This place is... Qin Hao hid behind a huge boulder as he stared at the beautiful bodies in the cold lake in front of him. Anger involuntarily surfaced on his face. Si Huan actually dragged him here to watch the female disciples of the Eastern Celestial sect bathe. Their arms were like jade, their backs were smooth, and as they joked around with their fellow disciples, the water droplets that splashed up from the cold lake glided across their bodies. Especially when Qin Hao saw those women wearing light gauze sitting on the edge of the cold pond. Their long, white legs stretched out from under their almost completely transparent clothes. To him, it was no different from being naked. Thus, he immediately turned his head and body around. A pair of powerful palms grabbed Si Huan's neck. Gritting his teeth, he said in a deep voice, "You tricked me?" Now, he and Si Huan were on the other side of the cold pond. The distance between them was very close. Fortunately, it was dark and there was a large rock to hide them. Moreover, the cold air from the cold pond was very strong. It was very good for concealment. Otherwise, it would be difficult to guarantee that they would not be discovered. Heavy breathing could be heard from Si Huan's pitch-black mask. He tried his best to point at his neck, indicating that he was about to die. Although Qin Hao was extremely dissatisfied, he could not really strangle him to death. He slowly loosened his grip. "How is it, brother?" "It's a feast for the eyes. It's so satisfying," Si Huan said vulgarly. He bent down and grabbed the rock with both hands. His head carefully peeked out and stared at the beautiful bodies in the cold pond. His eyes shone with a golden light. If his face was not blocked, it was hard to imagine what kind of face the little overlord of the Western capital would have at this moment. Qin Hao's heart was beating very fast. He lowered his head and squatted behind the rock. He did not join in with Si Huan's shameless behavior. No wonder Si Huan was so careful when he found him. He was so secretive and told him not to tell anyone. He left the three-headed demon dragon at home and only brought Qin Hao out. It was because Qin Hao was very worried now. If they were discovered, how would he deal with it? His reputation was ruined in the hands of the little overlord of the Western capital. He became the crazy peeping demon of the infinite divine domain. Xiaohan knew what to do. If word got back to the divine wilderness and Vivian and Bauer found out, it was over. His reputation would be ruined. However, compared to this, he was more worried about being discovered by the deity of the eastern sky. How would he be able to return to the Western capital alive? The deity of the Eastern Victory was the strongest person in the divine domain besides the divine master. Even Daisakong was no match for him. At this moment, Qin Hao silently glanced at Si Huan. He saw that Si Huan was staring straight ahead. He was probably drooling. Qin Hao was considering whether to abandon the little overlord of the Western capital. It was still not too late to leave now. Unfortunately, Qin Hao did not have the chance. Almost as soon as he had this thought, a sigh could not help but be heard. It was especially clear in the cold pond under the spirit waterfall. "Woo-woo, I was born in the eastern deity heaven and bathed with the fairies. What more could I ask for?" Si Huan was so emotional that he shed tears. "Who are you?" "Ah, thief." Angry rebukes, screams, panic, and the sound of water splashing in the quiet cold pond instantly reached a boiling point. Countless fairies of the eastern deity heaven waved their hands to cover their bodies with clothes. Their palms flashed with a dazzling brilliance. Qin Hao was like a panicked rabbit. Without thinking, he instinctively grabbed Si Huan and ran. He shot into the sky from behind a rock. He used the fleet-foot stride to the extreme and rushed in the direction of the Western capital. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Dazzling streams of light shot out from the hands of the fairies of the eastern deity heaven. They were incomparably beautiful as they densely covered the sky. They had already sensed Qin Hao's aura and were incomparably furious. How could they tolerate a thief who came to peep at them bathing in the eastern divine region? Qin Hao grabbed Si Huan and weaved through the bombardment of countless emperor arts. His fleet-foot stride was unfathomable. Even though the fairies of the Eastern deity heaven reacted extremely quickly, they were still too slow for Qin Hao. This gave him enough time to escape. Go! At this moment, at the edge of the cold pond, a powerful fairy saw that the thief was about to escape. She grabbed at the surface of the cold pond with her 5 fingers. Endless white frost was sucked in her palm, and she slammed it into the distance. Boom! When this palm landed, the void shook violently. The sound of ice forming could be heard. The terrifying ice Tao intent seemed to have frozen this part of the world and sealed all the exits. Qin Hao sensed that the person who attacked was a heaven wheel expert. When this terrifying ice intent swept over, ice crystals formed on his and Si Huan's bodies almost immediately and quickly spread. Qin Hao's speed suddenly came to a halt as he sank into the chill. It was as if he was about to be frozen, but it was only for an instant. With a crack, the ice crystals that spread over his body shattered. Qin Hao's body was covered in spots of fire. Like a bird that had escaped from its cage, he disappeared into the horizon. Damn it, some of the fairies of the eastern deity heaven said with hatred. Their eyes were red. They had never suffered such humiliation. Not only were they seen naked, but the thief also ran away. This person's movement technique is extremely fast. His cultivation is not ordinary. Yeah, even Senior Sister couldn't stop him. The others were angry and helpless. Don't worry, you won't be able to escape. A tall and slender woman stood in front of the group of fairies. Earlier, she was the one who froze the void. At this moment, this fairy had a calm expression on her face. Although there was anger in her heart for not being able to make Qin Hao stay, she could sense two auras flying out from the Eastern Immortal Palace, pursuing after Qin Hao. She didn't know which direct disciple of the Celestial Lord was chasing after him. In short, there was no reason for the Eastern Deity Palace to return empty-handed. Awesome, this is too awesome. In the night sky, Si Huan was caught by Qin Hao. She was incomparably excited. What he'd done just now, he had seen all the fairies of the Eastern Deity Heaven and had even managed to escape safely. In the entire divine realm, only he, the little overlord of the Western capital, had such ability. His achievements were enough to be proud of, and he could make all the disciples of the aristocratic families in the divine realm die of envy. If you speak again, I'll throw you down. Qin Hao's face was tense. His words scared Si Huan so much that he shut his mouth obediently. It was true that they had left the Eastern Deity Heaven, but this didn't mean that the matter was over. Qin Hao felt a powerful divine while coming from behind at an extremely shocking speed. So fast, Qin Hao's expression changed. He raised his hand and sent out a palm strike. Bang! An incomparably powerful palm force surged out. In the void, a ball of sparks exploded, accompanied by the sound of ice crystals shattering. Qin Hao's body trembled, suffering from the powerful impact. Holding Si Huan, he slid back a distance. Looking over, he saw a female figure in yellow standing in front of him. Her beautiful face was 30% angry, and the remaining 70% was endless coldness. She looked at Qin Hao as though she was looking at a dead man. In the divine realm, there aren't many who can fight against me with 2 divine inscriptions and below. No wonder you dare to come to the Eastern Deity Heaven and behave so atrociously. The yellow-robed female spoke. When her palm force collided, she discovered that Qin Hao's situation was the same as hers. They both had a single divine inscription. Qin Hao didn't reply. On his face, a pair of deep eyes paused for a moment on the yellow-robed female. His intuition told him that this person was extremely powerful. After all, with only a single divine inscription, there weren't many who could fight against Qin Hao. In fact, before coming to the Eastern Deity Heaven, he hadn't met anyone like this before. Bzzz. With a twist of his footsteps, Qin Hao rushed towards a direction, not bothering the yellow-robed female. The woman in yellow snorted coldly. She drew a few seals in front of her with her finger. Suddenly, there was a flash of light in front of her. Divine light shone brightly as sharp ice divine swords materialized. She pointed her finger at Qin Hao, and the sword light suddenly pierced towards him. This female's strength is so terrifying. Si Huan's heart trembled. Geniuses could be identified with a single glance. Although they hadn't broken through to the heavenly wheel realm, he had seen many of them before. The aura exuded by the yellow-robed female gave him an intense sense of danger. Even in the core of the divine realm, the Seamless Academy, there wasn't anyone as terrifying as her. Qin Hao's figure paused and immediately stopped. He had the same feeling as Si Huan. The yellow-clothed woman's strength was extremely extraordinary. It was impossible for such an expert to ignore the opponent's attack. A wisp of dark red flame ignited on the tip of Qin Hao's finger. He suddenly pointed over, and a flame divine sword burst forth. It shuttled through the void and collided with the opponent's ice sword. Countless ice crystals shattered, and it successively dissolved the opponent's will of way. It directly pierced the yellow-clothed woman. The yellow-robed female had a look of astonishment on her face, after which she waved her hand, causing Qin Hao's crimson lotus divine fire to dissipate. A bright moon appeared above her head, and when the moonlight cascaded down, everything was enveloped in frost. Celestial heavenly wheel. Qin Hao was shocked. The potential of an almighty was comparable to Lu Qiu and Long Mei's talent. No wonder her divine power was so strong. Boom! The yellow-robed female's arms shook, and her beautiful hair danced wildly. The bright moon hung in the sky, and the frost invaded. Endless sword light fell from the void, piercing towards Qin Hao's head. Don't fight with her. Run. Si Huan was so frightened that his expression changed. Only now did he realize that he was in big trouble. Although he thought that Qin Hao wasn't ordinary, Si Huan wasn't confident in fighting with a celestial heavenly wheel. Chapter 2039. Qianqian Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The spirit of loyalty. Qin Hao raised his head and looked around. This area was completely covered by the moonlight. The bright moon hung high in the sky, and the powerful frost divine will sealed the space. Sword Qi was everywhere, faintly forming an attack. How could it be so easy to escape? He let go of Si Huan and raised his arms. A ball of flame appeared between his palms, and the red lotus divine fire on his body gathered into the ball of flame. It grew bigger and bigger, and the roar of a dragon could be heard between heaven and earth. Kill. The yellow-robed lady's face was cold. She pressed her palms down, and the frost sword Qi that filled the sky rapidly fell down. The scene was like a torrential downpour. Boom! At this moment, Qin Hao punched out, causing the gigantic sphere of light to explode. A flame dragon roared as it soared into the sky, transforming into a terrifying flame tornado. When the ice and frost sword Qi in the sky descended, they were all sucked into the flames and melted. Not bad. The yellow-robed lady couldn't help but praise. With such ability, why did he have to be a thief? She flicked her finger upwards, and instantly, the bright moon radiated a resplendent light. A powerful undercurrent of power surged up from below Qin Hao's position. As far as the eye could see, a vast expanse of frost appeared. It was like a peacock spreading its tail, fanning out in the shape of a fan, and transforming into a 100-meter-long sword shadow. Si Huan saw this scene and was so frightened that he almost screamed. However, the yellow-robed lady's bright, moon-divine power didn't stop. It continued to rise until the frost almost covered her entire body. Following this, the hundreds of sword shadows became more and more solid, as if they had turned into a real frost sword mountain, trapping the two of them in the center. It's over, it's over, it's hopeless. When did such a fierce woman appear in the eastern sky, celestial realm? Si Huan's expression was incomparably nervous. He hid behind Qin Hao and grabbed his clothes. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have made the eastern celestial cold lake his target today. Qin Hao also felt pressure from the yellow-robed lady. She was a celestial level Tianlun. If she went all out, it was enough to expose his true strength. Qin Hao's expression became serious. He pointed his sword to the sky, trying to resonate with the way of heaven. Invisibly, a few strands of Origin Realm aura was released. Tianlun, Tianluan in his body. Boom! The surrounding huge frosty sword mountains began to move. The void rumbled as they crushed towards the center. Si Huan's face grew paler and paler. If they were really trapped here, with his ability, he might really lose his life. Whoosh! At this moment, a beam of sword light shot down from the sky and landed on the battlefield in time, nailing the position of Qin Hao and the others. This was an extremely vast sword light, as if it carried the might of the heavens. With a bang, the sword light fell, and the surrounding mountains of ice and frost exploded into millions of pieces, dispersing into the distance. Borrowing sword from the heavens, Qin Hao shouted in a deep voice. His sword fingers activated the sword will, and this beam of sword light that came from outer space charged towards the yellow-robed woman. Si Huan slapped the table in praise. Heavenly might! How is this possible? The yellow-robed lady's expression changed. She seemed to be in disbelief, but she did feel a strand of will of heaven from Qin Hao's sword will. Could this person be related to the Divine Master? Without much time to think, Qin Hao switched from defense to offense. In order to escape, he chose to take the initiative to attack. The attack that contained a strand of will of heaven was not to be underestimated. The yellow-robed lady raised her head and shouted. Her beautiful hair danced in the wind. Her body seemed to have turned into a real moon, filled with the divine will of frost. Kacha! Layers of ice appeared between her and the sword from the heavens. They combined and formed an indestructible protective wall. When the sword pierced down, the whole world shook crazily. It was terrifying, as if the universe had been turned upside down. Inside the Eastern Divine Heaven sect, all the frozen spirit waterfalls exploded. For a moment, the water surged like waves. Boom! The ice wall collapsed, and so did the sword chi. Qin Hao and the yellow-robed lady seemed to have suffered a heavy impact. Blood seeped out of the corners of their mouths. Their bodies slid back more than 100 feet. Si Huan was even worse. He let out a wild howl and flew up and down. It was as if he was blown away by a hurricane. He flew towards the sky uncontrollably. I have offended you today. I hope you can forgive. Qin Hao didn't have time to say the last word. Suddenly, a terrifying palm attack came from a certain direction. Qin Hao felt the divine will in this palm attack. His expression changed drastically. The heavenly wheel on his body instantly bloomed. For a moment, the blinding light of the wheel seemed to illuminate the night. Bang! As the incomparably heavy voice fell, the perfect wheel of light that appeared for a brief moment suddenly shattered. Qin Hao fell out like a kite, with its string cut. A thick layer of frost covered his body. He resisted the feeling of his body being frozen and let out an earth-shattering dragon roar before his divine power was sealed in ice. True dragon roar. With the dragon roar, an incomparably huge divine dragon phantom appeared between heaven and earth. Turbulent winds spread out from the divine dragon's mouth and swept in all directions. The yellow-robed lady was stunned. She was bombarded by the sound waves. Her divine soul was in chaos. She covered her ears with both hands and screamed in pain. All the spirit waterfalls in the Eastern Divine Heaven exploded, and the mountains collapsed. Rumble. After a violent tremor, the space returned to silence. But at this time, Qin Hao and Si Huan were long gone. The yellow-robed lady withstood the dragon roar. Her hair was messy, and the corners of her lips were stained with blood. Her clothes were also disheveled. She stood rooted to the ground and stared blankly for a long time. True dragon roar, the divine technique of the dragon clan. A goddess in a green dress appeared and stood beside the yellow-robed lady. She looked in the direction where Qin Hao had disappeared. Her eyes were filled with confusion. When the yellow-robed lady heard the other party's voice, she suddenly trembled. Only then did she regain her senses. Her disheveled face was filled with anger. She was about to give chase. No need to give chase, the goddess in a green dress said. The little overlord of the Sikong clan in the west capital, Si Huan. The yellow-robed lady gritted her teeth. When the true dragon roar disrupted her divine soul, she saw the bright red hair clearly. Since we know that he is the little overlord of the Sikong clan, there is no point in giving chase, the goddess in a green dress said. But senior sister, the yellow-robed lady looked at the other party. The hatred in her heart could not be quelled. The goddess in a green dress smiled and said, "If we don't tell anyone, no one else in the divine realm will know. What happened today was indeed difficult for the Eastern Divine Heaven to talk about. As for Daesekong, if the Eastern Divine Heaven did not say anything, the other party would not dare to spread the news either. Once it was spread, both sides' reputations would be damaged. The yellow-robed lady gritted her teeth. The scene of her battle with Qin Hao appeared in her mind. If it were not for the fact that she was blocked, Si Huan would definitely not have been able to escape. To be able to fight evenly with junior sister, this person is definitely not a nobody. There will be plenty of opportunities to settle the score. Let's go back. The goddess in a green dress smiled and took the yellow-robed lady's hand. The Heavenly Wheel Realm cultivator beside Si Huan was not simple. He had the supreme divine technique of the Dragon Clan and could borrow the power of the Heavenly Path. It was difficult to guarantee that he was not someone beside the Divine Master. If that was the case, the Eastern Divine Heaven would not be able to obtain justice even if they continued to fight. After all, the Divine Master had the final say in the Divine Realm. The yellow-robed lady glanced in the direction of the Western capital, as if she wanted to remember something. Then, the two of them returned to the Eastern Divine Palace. Qin Hao's identity was a mystery in their hearts. Putting aside the true dragon's roar and borrowing the power of the Heavenly Path, the wheel light that illuminated the night was also extremely shocking. Looking at it, it should be the same level as the yellow-robed lady. There were not many people like this in the infinite divine realm. They had a premonition that they would meet Qin Hao again sooner or later. Pooh! Fresh blood spurted out from Qin Hao's mouth. His body and face were covered with frost. His limbs were stiff, and he could not move at all. It was as if his blood had stopped flowing. If not for the fact that he could still breathe, Si Huan would have thought that he was dead. Chu San, hang in there. We are almost back to the Western capital. At this moment, Si Huan was so anxious that his eyes were bloodshot. He clutched a warm pearl in his hand and pressed it firmly against Qin Hao's chest. He hugged Qin Hao, who was about to turn into a popsicle, and flew desperately towards the Western capital. This pearl was a rare treasure. It was a gift from the Divine Master to his grandfather. Si Huan had long known that the Eastern Sky Immortal's ice divine energy was powerful, so he had brought it with him before leaving. Now, the pearl bestowed by the Divine Master was unable to neutralize the power of the ice palm that Qin Hao had been struck by. Si Huan could clearly sense that the power contained in the ice palm was rapidly invading Qin Hao's organs. If it was not neutralized in time, the consequences would be dire. Take me to senior brother. He can save me. Qin Hao's lips and eyebrows had turned white. After speaking, he could no longer hold on and fell into a deep coma. When his mind stopped working, he only remembered one scene in his mind. The person who had struck him in the end had 4 divine inscriptions flashing on his wheel. As expected, he was too weak in the face of an opponent who had cultivated for a longer time than him. Si Huan's eyes were misty. He couldn't feel the slightest bit of warmth from Qin Hao in his palm. It was as if he had turned into a cold corpse. He had indeed been testing the waters. He wanted to see if Qin Hao would abandon him in the face of danger, and if he was qualified to be his close friend. Now, he had his answer. Even in the face of despair, Qin Hao still didn't abandon him and didn't hesitate to bear the infamy with him. On the way back to the Western capital, Si Huan didn't use as much time as Qin Hao. Even though his flawless dilly was about to burn out, he couldn't compare to Qin Hao, who didn't use any divine power and only relied on his movement techniques. After arriving at the Sikong residence, Si Huan rushed to the side yard and rushed to Zine and the others. He put Qin Hao down and shouted, "Quick, save him." He said, "You can save him." "What's going on?" Zine and the others were shocked. They looked at Qin Hao, who was lying on the ground with his eyes closed and his body covered in a thick layer of ice. They couldn't sense any signs of life from him. "Stop talking nonsense." He said, "You can save him. If you don't help, he'll die," Si Huan shouted angrily. Swoosh! A beam of sword light rested on Si Huan's neck. Wux's Emperor Intent formed a sword. The sharp golden blade in his hand could end Si Huan's life with a slight movement. "Don't be rash. Let's save him," Zine said. He and Divine Lord Taichu channeled their divine power. Her palms fell on Qin Hao's body. Suddenly, divine light shone brightly. Dazzling light bathed Qin Hao's body, trying to melt the ice. However, Xin and Divine Lord Taichu worked together but couldn't break the ice on Qin Hao's body at all. There was no sign of it breaking. Chu Patriarch, Chi people, little he, you come too, Xin said. The three figures approached. Beams of divine light of Tian Luan bloomed one after another, surrounding everyone. Waves of divine power fell on Qin Hao. However, what was shocking was that the flames of the way of the Qi and Chu Patriarch, as well as Xin and the others, couldn't do anything to the ice on Qin Hao's body. There was no reaction at all. How can this be? Chu Patriarch was extremely shocked. He looked up at Qi Zhu. Qi Zhu asked Si Huan, what kind of ice technique is he under? Who hurt him? Chapter 2040. Si Huan had called Qin Hao out, but no one knew where he had gone or what he had done. Now that he had returned, he was unconscious and his body was frozen. It was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries. Everyone knew how capable Qin Hao was. He had forged a perfect heavenly wheel, taken over the heavenly path of Kunlun, and become the god of Kunlun. He carried the power of all living beings on the Kunlun continent. To put it bluntly, there were few opponents below the divine master level who could hurt him. After the battle at the Kunlun Sea, Qi Zhu and Ancestor Chu both thought that Qin Hao had endless potential. It was because of this that they decided to follow and assist him. Xin knew Qin Hao better than the two great ancestors. He not only carried the power of all living beings on the Kunlun continent, but he was also the ruler of the heavenly path of the original realm. With the power of two planes in his body and his extraordinary talent, it was hard to imagine that he had been injured so badly. I hope young Master C can tell us the truth. Although we are prisoners, we still have the determination to attack the Sikong residents. Even if we fail, the Heaven's Eye Divine World will definitely send people to investigate. Xine's eyes were cold. He had high hopes for Qin Hao. Although Si Huan believed that he could save Qin Hao, the premise was that Xin could not remove the divine ice in his body. How could he save Qin Hao? Si Huan stammered. Thinking of the scene at the cold lake, he found it difficult to speak. Let me do it. A figure stepped into the courtyard. Suddenly, a powerful aura rushed over. Xin looked up and said, Senior Sikong. Fortunately, it was not a mortal venerable Dongsheng. Otherwise, it would have been difficult. Daisakong looked down at Qin Hao's condition and sighed. He waved at Xin and the others. Everyone understood tacitly and immediately gave up their seats. At this moment, Xin and the others were shaken. They had been in the infinite divine realm for so long, so they had heard a little about the forces in the divine realm. The Eastern Victory Immortal Venerable that Daisakong spoke of was a peak powerhouse in the divine realm. He had established the Eastern Immortal Heaven and had countless disciples. His might shook the entire Eastern Divine region, and he was known as the #1 heavenly wheel expert under the Divine Master Realm. His status was comparable to exalted Zihua of the heavenly Ho Divine Realm. At this moment, everyone finally understood that Si Huan had brought Qin Hao to the Eastern Celestial Heavens, and the frost on his body was caused by the experts of the Eastern Celestial Heavens. They couldn't help but feel shocked. Daisakong looked at Qin Hao and saw the thick ice covering his body. His expression turned serious. Then, he slowly extended a finger and pointed at Qin Hao's forehead. Dazzling divine light appeared on Daisakong's body. Strands of dazzling light flickered along his fingertip and merged into the terrifying ice. What a powerful sword intent. What thought? Daisakong's sword intent was similar to his myriad manifestations' sword intent. They both contained extremely powerful sharpness, but the two were different. My master, Sikong, cultivates the sword intent of Tianyang. At the side, Zhang explained softly. The cultivators of the infinite divine realm only cultivated the way of the sword, and the way of the sword was ever-changing. The three greatsword realms had multiplied countless types. Daisakong's Tianyang sword intent had softened the light attribute, and its killing power was stronger than other sword cultivators. Besides, as a former servant of the Divine Master, the Sikong family also dabbled in the way of the Sword of Space, but it wasn't very strong. Strands of Tianyang sword intent were continuously injected into the ice. Daisakong's body flickered with even more dazzling light, condensing into a flowing wheel of light. Four divine patterns appeared at the edge of the wheel of light, and it was filled with boundless divine power of the way of the sword. Under the erosion of this power, the ice covering Qin Hao's body gradually changed. It kept cracking and melting, turning into strands of white, frozen air that floated in spirals. When Zine and the others felt the strength of the white, frozen air, their expressions changed. At the same time, they retreated some distance and watched as the white, frozen air was evaporated by Daisakong's sword intent. "All right, I've melted the power that sealed them in ice. I'll leave the rest to you. After all, you alchemists are better at it. If there's anything else you need, just tell Zhang Yi. The Sikong family will cooperate fully." Daisakong said, and the wheel of light retracted into his body. He glared at Si Huan and said angrily, "Bastard, come with me." With that, he walked out of the courtyard. At first, he thought that Si Huan would bring Qin Hao into the forbidden area of the Eastern Divine Heaven. Who would have thought that he would peep at the disciple of the immortal Venerable Dong Sheng bathing? It was a disgrace to the family and an unforgivable crime. "Zhang Yi, help me take good care of Chu San." Si Huan lowered his head and said, then followed Daisakong and left. "Everyone, I'll be waiting outside the courtyard. If you need anything, just let me know." Zhang Xian said. Zine nodded slightly. At this moment, the people of the Sikong family had all left. Those who were guarding Qin Hao were the people of Kunlun's Hai Yuan. Chizu glanced outside the courtyard and whispered, "Zine, Daisakong seems to have recognized us." "It's not surprising. It's more important to check on Chu San's condition first." Zine sat down and gently held Qin Hao's wrist with one hand. He closed his eyes slightly and used his divine will to check. As time passed, his face became more and more unpleasant. Although the divine power that froze Qin Hao's body had been dissolved by Daisakong's sword will, there was still a terrible frost power left in his body. This power had penetrated his limbs and organs. At present, Qin Hao's body seemed to have turned into a 10,000-year-old ice house. His vitality had stopped flowing, and his divine soul, vitality, and divine power had fallen into a deep sleep. His situation was extremely bad. However, Qin Hao's Tianluan was still operating and didn't seem to be affected much. Zine realized that Qin Hao's Tianluan contained a strange power that was like a crystalline water flowing around it. Because of its existence, the frost divine power that was corroding Qin Hao's body was constantly being sucked in, slowly fusing into the water flow and dissolving into nothing. This situation was very rare. It seemed to be an instinctive self-healing. Strange. Zine frowned. He had lived for 10,000 years, and as an alchemist, he had seen many strange illnesses. However, he had never seen a situation like Qin Hao's. "Sect leader, are you confident?" Xiao Han's eyes were red as his hands trembled. His emotions were very unstable. "Don't be nervous. Chu San's situation isn't as bad as we imagined. What I find strange is that he seems to have a self-healing ability. Do you guys know about this?" Zine glanced at Xiao Han, Wuck, and the others. Self-healing ability? What pondered for a moment. "Sect leader, can you explain it more clearly?" Chu San's will contained a type of water power. Although it hasn't been refined into divine force, its power was enough to melt the ice in his body. Zine spoke. This wasn't simple. After all, the frost divine power of experts from the eastern immortal heavens wasn't something that he, Tai Chu, and the others could resolve. Could it be the tranquil netherwater? Wuck looked at Xiao Han as he recalled. It should be. Xiao Han nodded as his tensed heartstrings loosened slightly. The 10 elements were born together with the heavenly Tao of the divine desolate realm. They could be seen as the power of the desolate realm. Although their attributes were different, each of them had shocking potential and could bring about miracles. I don't know much about the tranquil netherwater. Based on Chu San's current situation, we were the ones who scared ourselves earlier. He can completely undo the seal on his body and remove the frost divine power of the eastern immortal heavens. However, since Senior Seekong has melted the ice in his body, we can't be idle. At the very least, we can concoct some pills to help Chu San regain his consciousness. Xine's frown loosened as he heaved a sigh of relief. Xiaohe, start the cauldron. Yes, master. Qin Xiaohe waved her hand, and a divine cauldron appeared in the center of the courtyard. Rows of medicinal herbs were placed on the shelves, filled with heavenly spiritual treasures. I'll make a list later. Chuyu, go and look for Lord Zhang San and see if he can gather all the medicinal herbs. Zine flicked his finger and a wisp of flame shot towards the bottom of the cauldron. Then, the cauldron floated up and rotated slowly as he started to concoct pills. The frost power in Qin Hao's body was very strong. Ordinary medicinal herbs would probably not be of much use to concoct pills. He needed the medicine to be more potent. Unfortunately, he didn't bring enough divine herbs. He couldn't possibly move the few celestial mountains in the Kunlun Sea out of the door. Yes, clan leader, Qi nodded. Then, Zine drew in the air with his finger, which condensed into wisps of light that entered Chuyu's mind. Chuyu immediately ran out to look for Zhang San. All right, let's disperse. I can concoct the pills alone. You're all suppressed by the heavenly path, and your situation isn't too good either. Just hold on for a few days and wait for Chu San to wake up. Zine instructed. Everyone nodded and returned to their rooms to regulate their breathing and cultivate. I want to stay with him. Xiaohan squatted down and held Qin Hao's cold hand. All right, Zine didn't refuse. He turned and walked towards the cauldron. He threw divine herbs into it and focused on concocting pills. He needed to concoct two types of pills. One was the fire-gathering pill, and the other was a pill that could stimulate the Tao of water. He tried to use these two methods to speed up the process of dissolving the frost power in Qin Hao's body. The process went very smoothly. After Chuyu obtained a required medicinal herbs from Zhang San, the two types of divine pills were concocted the next day. For this, Zine's body was exhausted. Qin Hao swallowed the medicinal pill and only woke up 5 days later. He slowly recovered and took a turn for the better. This trip shocked the Eastern deity Heaven slightly. It allowed him to see the true experts of the seamless divine domain. He was also dissatisfied with his own cultivation. He was still not strong enough. Heavenly Library. It was located in various parts of the divine realm. Almost every city had a heavenly library. The West Capital was naturally no exception. At this time, in the heavenly library of the West Capital City, a figure was sitting in the hall. His silver hair fluttered gently, and traces of divine wool flowed around his body. In front of Qin Hao, there was a tiny altar that was no more than 5 feet tall. Above the altar, there was an ancient book floating in the air. At this moment, the ancient book was emitting a powerful divine light. The pages flipped on their own, and countless divine runic seals floated out, landing on Qin Hao's body. Every divine runic seal that landed on Qin Hao's body would vanish very quickly, as if they had merged with his divine will. For several days, Qin Hao comprehended in the heavenly library. He used this to comprehend the Tao of the seamless divine Lord. It was as if he had thrown himself into the ancient book, and his will soared between the heavenly Tao. Endless wonders, endless wonders. On this day, Qin Hao stopped comprehending. He had comprehended the Tao of the seamless sword god from the ancient book. The Tao of space and the Tao of the sword complemented each other, allowing one to become a peerless divine lord. The seamless sword god's understanding and comprehension of the Tao of space and the Tao of the sword far exceeded Qin Hao's knowledge. It was incomparably profound, and it had unraveled many areas that he had previously been unable to comprehend. However, this kind of understanding could only be felt. Qin Hao was far from being able to display it. After all, at the Divine Lord realm, One's understanding of Tao could no longer be displayed through an individual. It required the complete integration of the will of an entire world, and one's divine-level cultivation and divine power were indispensable. Thus, Qin Hao is currently unable to reach the level of the seamless Sword God. Just as cultivation alone was not enough. Let's go. Qin Hao stood up, straightened his clothes, and prepared to leave the heavenly library. You're leaving just like that? Zine said with a smile. It seemed that Qin Hao was suppressing some emotions in his heart. He was unwilling to accept this. Senior brother, can one cultivate their Tao? Qin Hao stopped and turned to look at Zine. Chapter 2041. Cultivation skills were the divine power accumulated by a divine-level expert over time. Tian Luan, divine power, cultivation, and divine techniques were condensed together to form a comprehensive battle power. During the battle, although divine level also involved many factors such as the way of heaven and the environment, it was mainly reflected in these four factors. Now, Qin Hao understood the importance of cultivation more clearly. If it wasn't for his shallow cultivation, he could have easily crushed the forest seedling in the Kunlun Sea as the way of heaven. Now that he had come to the Avicii divine domain and faced experts with deeper cultivation, Qin Hao's performance was even worse. He was beaten by a four-vein expert from the eastern immortal heaven to the point that he lost the ability to fight. All this was because his cultivation was shallow. If his cultivation was similar to his opponent's, and they both had four-vein Tian Luan, how could he lose? So, he was obviously not convinced. Zine smiled and said, cultivation can naturally be cultivated. It will slowly accumulate in your Tian Luan with the accumulation of time. The people you see, the things you encounter, and everything you experience can be seen as the cultivation of cultivation. Senior brother, do you really not understand? The cultivation I am asking about is whether you can use external forces to increase your divine marks in a short period of time and not rely on time. Qin Hao was especially serious. If he relied on time, it would be difficult for him to catch up to divine king experts. Divine kings were born at the beginning of a universe, and their cultivation could be said to be terrifying. Hearing this, in the heavenly book hall, Tai Chu, Illusion Elder, Wuk, and the others all stopped comprehending and looked at Qin Hao in shock. Using an extremely short period of time to make the Tian Luan produce divine marks, he really dared to think about it. Cultivation is an extremely mysterious existence. It is the proof of a generation of experts going from weak to strong. It is the miracle of transcending through hardship in life and death. It is also the embodiment of one's talent and Tao will. If it is really like what you said, using external forces to produce divine marks in a short period of time is too unfair to experts who have cultivated for tens of thousands of years. Zine felt that Qin Hao's thoughts were extremely dangerous. He pondered for a moment before replying. That's true. There are indeed methods to produce divine inscriptions in this world. However, with my current abilities and knowledge, I'm still unable to comprehend it. The space was silent. Everyone in the hall fell into deep thought. But soon, Chu Zhu, Qi Zhu, and the others shook their heads, thinking that it was unrealistic. No, it was too illogical. According to Qin Hao's point of view, an ordinary person who knew nothing about martial arts could become an emperor with a single thought. In other words, a heavenly wheel realm expert who had just entered the divine realm could instantly possess 100,000 years of cultivation. It was completely impossible. After experiencing countless hardships, tempering, and miracles of transcending life and death, the sublimation of one's natural talent and Tao insight to the extreme. Looks like one's cultivation isn't a product of time. Qin Hao tried his best to savor Zine's understanding of Taoism. He seemed to have found the key to it, but the thoughts in his mind were very vague. Third day of junior high. Sihuan stepped into the hall with a smile. Seeing Qin Hao fully recovered, he asked, "You recovered very quickly. How do you feel now?" Whoosh! Wuk, Huanzun, Chu Yu, and the others immediately stood up and blocked Sihuan's path, their faces full of vigilance. Si Huan was stunned for a moment. There was no need to be so vigilant against him, right? I'm fine. Do you need something from me? Qin Hao's palms separated the crowd as he stepped forward and spoke softly. Yes. Si Huan nodded. Third day of junior high. You've just recovered from your injuries. It's not good for you to go out. If young Master C has any important matters like last time, I think there should be many people in the Seekong residence who are willing to help. You can look for Commander Zhang Tong. Zine said coldly. He didn't want Qin Hao to be in danger again. Zine Clan Lord, you worry too much. This time, young Master C came here to bring Junior High to the Big Dipper Mountain to watch the ceremony. The grandson of the Big Dipper, Celestial Sovereign, reached perfection not long ago and forged a saint-grade heavenly wheel. The entire Big Dipper Mountain was filled with joy. They held a banquet to celebrate and invited people from all over the divine realm to attend. Zhang Tong's tall figure stepped in. Zine knew the background of the people of the Kunlun Sea. A few days ago, he had laid his cards on the table with Zine and the others, so he directly called Zine by his name. The grandson of the Big Dipper, Celestial Sovereign, broke into the divine realm and wanted to invite my grandfather, but my grandfather didn't want to go, so he ordered me to go to the Big Dipper Mountain. Zhang Xian will bring the guards of the Seekong residence to accompany third day. Sihuan said honestly. This time, he definitely wouldn't cause trouble. Zine and Tai Chu exchanged a glance with each other. The Northern Dipper Mountain stood tall in the Northern Divine region, and it was also a hegemonic power, comparable to the Western Capital and the Eastern Immortal Heaven. Although the Northern Dipper Celestial Sovereign was extremely famous, the ancestors of the various hegemonic powers did not necessarily have to personally attend his grandson's Ascended God ceremony. In fact, Daisakong wasn't the only one who couldn't go. The Eastern Victory Immortal Sovereign and the Southern Courtyard's headmaster also couldn't go. I see. Zine nodded and looked at Qin Hao. Whether he went or not, he would let him decide. All right, I'll go with you. Qin Hao replied without thinking. This time, Commander Zhang Tong brought the guards of the Western Capital, and it was a grand occasion. The little tyrant of the Western Capital couldn't do anything out of line. I'll go with you. At this time, Wuk spoke up. Let Wuk go with you. Xiaohan gently tugged on Qin Hao's clothes. She was worried about letting Qin Hao follow Si Huan alone. Unfortunately, her cultivation was too low. Amen. Qin Hao nodded in agreement. Haha, let's go. Si Huan said happily and walked out. Zine gave Wuk a look, telling him to watch out and not cause any trouble. After that, Qin Hao and Wuk left with Zhang Tong. The Big Dipper Mountain, a giant of the Northern Divine region. This time, they invited many famous people of the Divine region. The occasion must be very grand. Chizu's face was full of yearning. A banquet hosted by a giant power at the core of a great realm would definitely be more grand than the one hosted by Kunlun. He didn't know how many Heavenly Wheel experts would be present. Focus on your comprehension, Zine said. He gently closed his eyes and sent his divine sense into the ancient book floating above the divine altar. This giant ancient book contained a wisp of the seamless divine master's divine will. Using it, everyone could comprehend the operation of the heavenly Tao in order of the seamless divine realm and integrate themselves into it as much as possible. After Qin Hao was injured and in danger, the Seekong manner and Daisakong's attitude towards them had improved a lot. The guards guarding the place where they lived had been dismissed. These days, Zine and the others could walk freely in the Western Capital. If they wanted to leave, Daisakong wouldn't stop them. However, Zine and the others didn't leave. They stayed in the Heavenly Tome Pavilion to comprehend and cultivate. Daisakong didn't ask about it either. Both sides maintained a tacit understanding. The Big Dipper Mountain. The Big Dipper family's foundation. The orthodoxy of the Big Dipper, Celestial Venerable. The Big Dipper, Celestial Venerable, Daisakong, and the Dean of the Southern Courtyard were as famous as the Eastern Victory, Immortal Sovereign. Their status in the God realm was equal. They guarded the core of the Seamless Academy on behalf of the Sword God of Ichi. Among the four of them, the Eastern Victory Immortal Sovereign was the strongest. He had 6 divine patterns in his heavenly wheel, and he was the strongest with his overwhelming strength. Next was the Big Dipper, celestial venerable. He had 5 meridians and cultivated for more than 50,000 years. He was also one of the first people to witness the birth of the seamless divine realm. The Big Dipper family had always had a good relationship with the Academy. When the realm was first opened, the Big Dipper Celestial Venerable was also a supporter of the sword god of Ichi. That was why they were able to guard the northern divine region and look down on the heavenly Tao of the seamless divine realm. Now that the Big Dipper Celestial Venerable's grandson had stepped into the divine way, the Big Dipper family had gained another core member. This was of great significance to the Big Dipper Mountain. Many forces and people of the God realm were invited here to show the Big Dipper's righteousness and express the Big Dipper family's attitude. Chapter 2042. The Western Capital team departed from Sikong City. Dai Sikong had sent his grandson, Zhang Xian, and a large number of guards. This was a show of respect to the Big Dipper Mountain. Along the way, Qin Hao and the others encountered many cultivators from the domain of the gods. All of them had powerful auras and were heading north from various majestic cities. Clearly, they had also received an invitation from the Big Dipper Mountain. Several hours later, the Western Capital team arrived at the number 1 sacred ground of the northern divine region, the Big Dipper Mountain. Qin Hao turned his gaze forward. Up ahead, a towering mountain range could be seen towering above the clouds. Immortal clouds revolved around it, exuding a majestic aura. Every divine peak seemed to be covered in gold, flickering with resplendent golden light, exuding a noble aura. It was like an immortal mountain, surging with waves of magnificence. Among the countless mountains, there were 3 that were the tallest. They stood at the center of the mountain range and were surrounded by thousands of mountains. From afar, they looked like 3 chairs placed there. The central peak is the exalted celestial peak, the Tao peak of the Big Dipper celestial sovereign. Only the upper echelons of the Big Dipper family are allowed to enter. The left and right peaks are controlled by the Big Dipper family patriarch and great elder respectively. Those who live there are also the core disciples of the Big Dipper Mountain. Zhang Xian pointed to the front and explained. The Big Dipper celestial sovereign cultivated a powerful, mountain-moving divine ability. There were countless mountains in the land of the Big Dipper Mountain, and the 3 peaks were the core. The closer one was to the periphery, the lower one's status would be. Qin Hao nodded. From this, one could see that the Big Dipper Mountain's hierarchy was quite severe. However, today was the day of the Big Dipper Celestial Sovereign's grandson's High God advancement ceremony, so the disciples would gather temporarily to strengthen their influence. Let's go, Zhang Xian said. He led the Western Capital team to the exalted celestial peak at the center of thousands of mountains. Dai Sikong's reputation and status in the God realm were on par with the Big Dipper Celestial Sovereign. In fact, they were closer to the Divine Master than the Big Dipper Celestial Sovereign, so there was no need to hide anything. On the other hand, the other cultivators of the God realm all lowered their heads after entering the Big Dipper Mountain. The weaker they were, the lower they flew to express their respect for the Big Dipper Celestial Sovereign. At this time, the exalted celestial peak was bustling with noise and excitement. An incomparably vast Taoist field was set up under the celestial venerable hall. On the left and right sides of the Taoist field was a celestial river. The sparkling and translucent river water flowed rapidly, filled with lush spiritual qi. It circled around the Taoist field, then flowed towards the 1,000 mountains, and finally circled around the entire Big Dipper Mountain. However, there were not many people who could stand in the celestial worthy palace. There were only a few dozen figures. It was obvious that not everyone could enter this palace. Below the training hall was a long flight of stairs that extended from the clouds to the ground. There were many people standing on the stairs. They were all disciples of the Big Dipper Mountain. Viewing platforms were set up on both sides of the stairs. Although the area was not as vast as the training hall, it was enough to accommodate hundreds of people. A viewing platform like this was divided into many levels, one after another from the clouds down the stairs. At this time, the cultivators from all over the God Realm were being received by the disciples of the Big Dipper Mountain. They landed on the viewing platforms on both sides of the stairs and looked up at the celestial worthy palace. The seamless divine realm was the core of the Sword Realm. There were countless experts and aristocratic families. Naturally, not everyone had the opportunity to approach the Big Dipper celestial sovereign. This depended on the background of the aristocratic family and the strength of the individual. The stronger one's cultivation was, the higher the viewing platform was arranged. On the other hand, those without any fame would be infinitely close to the lowest level. They wouldn't even have a seat. They could only stand and watch today's banquet. The immortal divine sovereign has arrived. As a particularly powerful aura descended, a disciple of the Big Dipper Mountain loudly shouted. Soon, a heavenly wheel elder appeared from the Big Dipper Mountain to welcome the immortal divine sovereign. He personally stood above the training hall, his position extremely close to the celestial worthy palace. The sect master of the Hidden Pill sect, the hidden divine sovereign, has arrived. Divine sovereign, please take a seat. The sect master of the secluded spring sect has arrived. The soaring cloud sect has arrived. The Shwani Taoist has arrived. Loud and clear names were spread. The entire Big Dipper Mountain's atmosphere was like a tide. The experts were all welcomed into the training hall. These heavenly wheel experts, sect masters were all qualified to be close to the Big Dipper celestial sovereign. He-Sun, the revered crane, has arrived. A disciple shouted. Ha, brother, he has arrived. Quickly, invite him in. On the stairs, a fat attendant of the Big Dipper Mountain came to welcome him. How can I, He-Sun, be absent from the grand banquet of the Gene God, the grandson of the celestial sovereign? This is a bottle of divine pills that I have prepared for young Master E. Please kindly accept it. He-Sun took out the divine pills he had refined. Brother, he is too polite. Please take a seat. The plump deacon accepted the gift with a smile and led the way for He-Sun, bringing him to a viewing platform at the bottom of the stairs. There were already quite a number of people seated here. When they saw He-Sun, they all greeted him, and He-Sun responded with a smile. Although this viewing platform was located below the training hall, it was not far from the Celestial Sovereign Temple. After all, they were all people who had forged the heavenly wheel and were all powerhouses of the divine path. Unfortunately, like He-Sun, they did not have a strong background. Compared to the sect masters, and patriarchs above, their status was naturally lower. Regardless of whether it was He-Sun or the others, they did not show any dissatisfaction. In terms of strength, they were actually not as strong as the people sitting in the training hall. This was something they still knew. Buzz! A strong movement came from the void. In the distance, a large group of people spread out in a black mass. There were many figures. They are cultivators from the South Academy. Someone said with a respectful expression. The South Academy stood in the south of the divine realm. It was like the Big Dipper Mountain that dominated the area. Today, they sent so many people to observe the ceremony. It was enough to show their respect for the Big Dipper celestial sovereign. Friend of the South Academy, please take a seat. At this time, a middle-aged man standing in the training hall said kindly. His whole body exuded the aura of dragons and tigers, giving people a strong pressure. It was the Big Dipper clan's patriarch, the son of the celestial sovereign, the Big Dipper divine sovereign. How can we be absent from the celestial sovereign's invitation? This is a gift that my master ordered me to prepare. The group from the South Academy directly landed on the training hall from the sky. An extremely old elder waved his hand. Immediately, several disciples of the South Academy walked out, each holding a divine sword in their hands. There were a total of 3 swords, and they presented them in front of the Big Dipper celestial sovereign. Come, take it. The Big Dipper celestial sovereign laughed. The divine weapons produced by the South Academy had always been well received in the divine realm. At this moment, in the void, another group of figures appeared. They were like dancing snow. When they approached the celestial sovereign peak, the temperature instantly dropped a lot. The fairies of the eastern immortal heaven have arrived. Many cultivators on the grandstand stood up and looked at the fairies with veiled faces in the nine heavens, showing strong admiration. "Fairies, please take a seat," the Big Dipper celestial sovereign said happily. "My master can't come in person because of some matters. He specially ordered me to present a celestial stamen." The person who led the group from the Eastern Immortal Heaven here was the woman in green who had defeated Qin Hao with one palm. In addition, the woman in yellow was also present. They all wore veils and gave people a cold feeling that they were otherworldly. "Thank you, Senior Immortal Dongshan." The Big Dipper celestial sovereign personally stepped forward to receive the celestial stamen from the Eastern Immortal Heaven. He was very excited. He knew that the celestial stamen of the Eastern Immortal Heaven had absorbed the essence of the icefall. It was condensed from Immortal Dongxing's will. If others refined it, it would be of great help to their cultivation. "I'm Big Dipper, E." "Thank you, Senior Qingrong." A young man stepped out from beside the Big Dipper celestial sovereign. He had handsome features and a natural arrogance. He thanked the woman in green. Qingrong was the eldest direct disciple of Immortal Dongshan. It was said that she was also his only disciple so far. It was rumored that not only was she as beautiful as a fairy, but her strength was also the best in the divine realm. She was faintly showing signs of catching up to the current four giants. Some people even said that her strength was already comparable to the current four giants of the divine realm. Today, Fairy Qingrong had personally come to observe the ceremony. How could the Big Dipper clan not be excited? The Big Dipper hierarch knew very well that Qingrong's future potential was boundless. It could even be said that among all the people present today, besides his father, the Big Dipper hierarch, Fairy Qingrong's cultivation was the strongest. "Young master, he is too polite." Qingrong softly spoke. Her voice was extremely melodious. After that, she brought the fairies from the eastern celestial immortal realms to sit at the highest point of the Dao Plaza, together with a member of the Southern Academy. Their seats were close to the entrance of the celestial deity hall. "Big Dipper righteousness, I'm here." The people of the Eastern Immortal Heavens had just sat down when suddenly a loud shout rang out, extremely ear-piercing and filled with disrespect. On the crowded celestial worthy peak, every cultivator on the viewing platform looked towards the source of the voice, who was so audacious as to call himself the father of today's main character, Big Dipper, E. Chapter 2043. On the exalted celestial peak, the disciples of the Big Dipper Mountain were enraged. The Big Dipper Patriarch's expression changed as well. However, after seeing who it was, the Big Dipper Patriarch's expression slowly faded. Western Capital. Little Overlord Si Huan. Many disciples of the Big Dipper Mountain discussed softly. For a moment, the people from the various forces looked at the red, curly hair floating in the wind and revealed deep fear. The little overlord of the Western Capital was infamous. Who in the divine realm didn't know him? Even the naughty girls over the age of 16 in the outer regions of the divine realm would use the little overlord's name to threaten them when they angered their elders, claiming that they would be sent to the Sikong residence as maids. Every time this happened, the girls would restrain themselves and become obedient and sensible. From this, it could be seen how powerful Si Huan's deterrence was. Big Dipper Patriarch, Young Master, E. This is a gift from my master, Sikong Ming. The Western Capital's team landed directly on the training hall from the sky without any hesitation. Zhang San waved his hand, and the guards of the Western Capital came forward with rare divine stones and luminous pearls. "Thank you, Commander Zhang San." The Big Dipper Patriarch thanked him. He glanced at Si Huan and smiled. Nephew Si Huan is actually in the mood to come personally. This is beyond my expectations. Haha, Big Dipper's nomological laws have reached perfection and stepped into the divine realm. Of course I'll come to support you, right? Si Huan laughed loudly at Big Dipper Patriarch. He muttered in his heart, "Since my grandfather has spoken, I have to come even if I don't want to." "Take a seat," the Big Dipper Patriarch said. Zhang Xin nodded slightly and led the Western Capital's team to one side of the training hall, right next to the Exalted Celestial Hall. Coincidentally, they were sitting in the same area as Eastern Celestial Peak and Fairy Qingrong. "Si Huan, behave yourself today." Big Dipper Patriarch secretly transmitted his voice, afraid that he would disturb the Big Dipper Mountain. "So what if I don't behave? Are you messing with me?" Si Huan swaggered into the seat with his hands behind his back, not caring about Big Dipper Patriarch's feelings. "Commander Zhang San, how is Senior Sikong doing?" As the Western Capital's team took their seats, Fairy Qingrong asked. "My master, Sikong, is still fine." A wisp of embarrassment flashed through his face, and he faintly didn't dare look Chun-Shi in the eye. Fairy Qingrong nodded and said, "But my Eastern Sky Celestial Sect hasn't been doing well recently. Thieves have appeared and caused chaos in the Holy Land, causing people to be unable to rest in peace. What does Commander Zhang Kuei think about this? Which scoundrel is so daring to disturb the venerable immortal's cultivation? He must be severely punished." Zhang Xian said righteously. "I, Qingrong, have no idea where that scoundrel came from because I killed him on the spot. The God Lord handed the deity realm to us, the four great orthodoxies, to manage. For the past 100 years, the peaceful environment of the deity realm might have boosted the arrogance of that scoundrel. He actually dared to attack our Eastern Celestial Immortal Heaven, as though he had forgotten the divine might of our esteemed master back then. I, Qingrong, will definitely not tolerate such reckless people." Fairy Qingrong said and deliberately stared at Si Huan. Her stare made Si Huan shiver a few times, and a hint of fear appeared in his eyes. That's right. Zhang Kuei rubbed his forehead as though he was wiping off sweat. "This is strange. Scoundrels actually appeared in the Eastern Celestial Immortal Heaven to cause chaos. Do we need the Southern Courtyard to send people to set up a formation?" At this moment, a sentence came from the opposite side. It came from a refined young man from the Southern Courtyard. This young man's seat was close to the leading elder of the Southern Courtyard. Many Heavenly Wheel experts with stronger auras than him were also sitting behind the young man, making him seem especially extraordinary. "The scoundrels have been killed by me. There's no need for the number one person of the Southern Courtyard to take action. I just hope there won't be a next time, right, Commander Zhang Kuei?" Fairy Qingrong said with a smile. Yes. Zhang Kuei nodded repeatedly. His body was very low, as though he was under great pressure. Nangong Miao, the new Heavenly Wheel expert of the Southern Courtyard. He's the direct disciple of the Dean and is at the saint level. Si Huan silently explained to Qin Hao beside him. He glanced at Nangong Miao and continued. "This person is extremely arrogant and thinks that he's the number one person of the current generation in the divine plane. In his words, after entering the academy, he can also stand side by side with the core disciples. The Seamless Academy was the symbol of the divine plane and the absolute core of the Sword Realm. The experts gathered there were the first-generation elders who followed the Divine Master when he opened up the Great World. The talents that could be accepted by the Academy were very strong. It was hard to find one in a few hundred years. Nangong Miao said that he could stand side by side with the core disciples of the Academy. How confident was that? In fact, among the disciples of the aristocratic sect in the Divine Plane, Si Huan's attitude towards Nangong Miao was the most unpleasant. Firstly, he was too arrogant. Secondly, he might be jealous. After all, Si Huan and Nangong Miao were of the same generation, but their cultivation was inferior. Now, Beidou Skylord's grandson, Beidou Yi, had also stepped into the Divine Plane. Si Huan and Shidu were in an extremely awkward situation. Confidence is a good thing, but blind confidence is stupid. Luck said. From some simple conversations, one could see Nangong Miao's personality. For example, when facing Fairy Clearbrow of Eastern Celestial Heaven, Nangong Miao didn't refer to himself as a junior. It was as if he had placed himself at the same level as Fairy Clearbrow. Take care of yourself. It's fine as long as we don't act blindly, Qin Hao said. Sensing the aura emitted from Fairy Clearbrow, he could already confirm that the person who had knocked him unconscious with a single palm strike was this powerhouse. On the Tao field, the disciples of the four great influences of the divine plane chatted with each other. The atmosphere was harmonious. Although Fairy Clearbrow's words contained a faint hint of mockery, besides Zhang San and the others, no one else could understand the underlying meaning. Time slowly passed. More and more cultivators rushed to Big Dipper Mountain, and the scene became increasingly grand. But what was surprising was that Beidou Skylord still hadn't appeared. Many people knew that the Skylord was still waiting for someone. They're here. Fairy Clearbrow looked in a certain direction, her beautiful eyes flashing. It was as if she could feel an extremely shocking force rapidly approaching. Zhang San, the Big Dipper clan leader and a leading elder of the Southern College, also looked in the same direction. They also felt the powerful aura. Seamless Academy's elder, Severing Love, has arrived. An incomparably solemn shout rang out. In an instant, all the cultivators on Celestial Mountain stood up at the same time. They cupped their hands and said in unison, "Greetings to Elder Severing Love." Buzz, an incomparably dazzling divine light descended, bringing powerful figures into the center of the Tao field. As the light gradually dissipated, a group of people with extraordinary auras was revealed. The elders and disciples of the Seamless Academy had arrived. The celestial bloodline has gained another divine path cultivator. Old Man Severing Love, representing the sword gods of the Academy, to celebrate. A deep voice came from a tall old man at the front of the Academy's team. His voice was exceptionally loud. This old man wore a plain gray robe with an ordinary ribbon tied around his waist. His face was very kind, but his entire body exuded an extraordinary aura. After a glance, people couldn't help but feel a sense of respect. This old senior sword will is so powerful. Wuck's eyes flashed. When the old man appeared in front of him, he felt the sword will of all creations in his body become restless. It was as if it was affected by the old man's aura. Faintly, it resonated with the sword will of all creations. Not only Wuck, but all the swordsmen present felt this, including Qin Hao. Traces of light of calamity flowed along their bodies, as if they would fly to the old man's body at any time and merge with his aura. Sword God Severing Love, a supreme expert of the same generation as the Divine Master. He joined forces to create the Seamless Academy. He has 6 meridians and is at the Saint level. There are at least 5 experts like Elder Severing Love in the Academy. Young Master Chu San, Wuck, quickly come forward to greet him. Zhang San hurriedly said and quickly stepped forward. Just as Zhang San moved, Goddess Qing Rong and the leading elder of the Southern Academy did not dare to delay. They hurriedly got up and came in front of Elder Severing Love together. Everyone bowed and said, "Sikong of the West Capital, Zhang San. Eastern Celestial Heaven, Qing Rong. Southern Academy, Chenghuai. Big Dipper Mountain, Big Dipper Jichong. Greetings to Elder Severing Love." The 4 of them bowed at the same time with an extremely respectful attitude. The sword God Severing Love in front of them was not only powerful, but also had an extremely high seniority. The reason why the Seamless Divine Domain was able to survive until now was because of Severing Love. He was one of the founding elders of the Sword World, along with Sword God Severing Love. Qin Hao, Si Huan, Wuck, Nangong Miao, Beidou Yi, and the yellow-robed woman from the Eastern Celestial Heaven followed closely behind Zhang San and the others and bowed to express their heartfelt respect for the old man. "You may all rise." Elder Zhang Qing smiled amiably. His gaze swept over Zhang Xian and the others, looking very amiable. These people were all his juniors, the children of the Seamless Academy. Zhang San was Daisakong's confidant. Qing Rong was the direct disciple of the Eastern Celestial Lord. Nangong Miao was the strongest person in the Southern Academy, and Beidou Jichong was the son of the Celestial Lord. "Greetings, Grandpa Severing Love." Si Huan squeezed in from the back and stood obediently in front of the old man. Elder Severing Love raised his hand and patted Si Huan's head. A layer of divine light appeared from the old man's palm and filtered Si Huan's body. Your cultivation has improved. Si Huan, you have to work hard. Don't disgrace your grandfather and parents." And after being baptized by Elder Severing Love's sword intent, Si Huan felt incomparably comfortable and nodded vigorously. "Qingrong, you're about to form the 5th meridian, right?" Elder Severing Love asked. Qingrong replied, "Senior's memory is very clear. In another 100 years, I will be able to form the 5th meridian." Hiss! At the side, Qin Hao sucked in a breath of cold air. Forming the 5th meridian, a heavenly wheel expert who had cultivated for 50,000 years. That palm strike, it wasn't unjust for him to lose. "Loy, quickly come and greet Senior Severing Love." At this moment, Qingrong waved towards her yellow-robed junior sister, following which the yellow-robed junior sister stepped forward and said, "Junior Loy greets Senior." Could it be that this junior is... Old man, Severing Emotions, looked at her, as if he had guessed something. His eyes flashed with astonishment as he looked at Fairy Qingrong. Fairy Qingrong smiled and nodded in response to the old man's guess. "Good, good. In the future, the Seamless Sword world will have your inheritance. Us bunch of old bones can retire." "Ha ha." Elder Severing Love laughed happily. "You're right. We should retire and leave the sword world to them." "Ha ha." Severing Love, I didn't expect you to come today." A hearty laughter rang out from the majestic, exalted, celestial palace. A powerful figure stepped out. He wore a jade crown and a Taoist robe. He walked lightly towards Severing Love. However, every step he took was like a giant mountain pressing down on the hearts of everyone on the Tao Peak, giving off an extremely heavy pressure. "Greetings, exalted celestial." The exalted celestial peak was in an uproar. On the steps, countless figures bowed in respect. The expert who stepped out of the palace was the ancestor of the Big Dipper Mountain, exalted celestial North Star. Chapter 2044. The Big Dipper Clan, Big Dipper E, and many factions of the God Realm hurried to the Big Dipper Mountain to celebrate. Countless Heavenly Wheel experts were present. The West Capital, South Court, and Eastern Immortal Sky were all present. Now, the Seamless Academy, the supreme holy land of the Sword World, also had a leading doyen, Sword God Severing Love. At this moment, the 1,000 steps of Celestial Worthy Peak were filled with a hubbub of voices. Countless cultivators from the realm of the gods looked at the emotionless Sword God and North Star Exalted Celestial at the entrance of Celestial Worthy Hall, their gazes filled with deep respect and envy. Today, the entire Big Dipper Mountain was a grand scene. It showed the importance of the major factions in the God Realm. No other sect or family could compare to such a scene. Sword God Severing Love personally came. It's the Big Dipper Mountain's honor. If I can receive such treatment, I can die without regrets. Hey, wake up. Stop dreaming. Crane Lord, the one standing behind Deacon Shui and accompanying Sword God Severing Love, should be your son, right? On the viewing platform below the training ground, someone with keen eyes noticed that the youth behind Deacon Shui's face contained some of He-sun's charm. "It is my son, He-kan. He has entered the academy and become Deacon Shui's sword-bearing attendant." He-sun smiled happily, looking very proud. "Congratulations, Crane Lord. Congratulations." Many people cupped their hands and congratulated him. The academy was the absolute core of the Seamless Realm. Only a few people were qualified to enter, and all of them were geniuses. "Ha ha, you think too highly of him. My son is just a sword-bearing attendant." He-sun said. "He-sun, no need to be humble. Even a sword-bearing attendant of the academy is enough to make us envious." A Heavenly Wheel expert laughed. After entering the academy, one would be able to cultivate in the academy and have many opportunities to approach the top experts, such as sword god Severing Love and the other doyens. With a little guidance, one would definitely benefit immensely. More importantly, the Academy was the foundation of the Divine Master's orthodoxy. Those who entered naturally had extraordinary statuses. Isun was grinning from ear to ear as he chatted with the other Heavenly Wheel experts. Sending Heekin into the Academy and following Deacon Shui was the proudest thing in his life. In fact, Isun had also seen Qin Hao and Wuk in the West Capitals team. Zien had crossed the border from Tianyong to ask for his help. He wanted to send Wuk into the Academy to cultivate, so Isun naturally had some impression of him. When Isun first arrived at Big Dipper Mountain, he was quite conflicted. After all, Qin Hao and Wuk's positions were actually higher than his. Not only were they not defeated by the West Capital's Little Conqueror, they even climbed up to Daisakong's family's influence. This made Isun somewhat unhappy. However, now that his son was also standing in front of the Celestial Worthy Temple and looking down at the experts below, the unhappiness in his heart instantly dissipated. He felt much more comfortable. So what if Zien was lucky enough to climb up to Daisakong? His son had already become a member of the Academy. Deacon was in the 8th level of the law and was also about to prove divinity. Moreover, he would do so in the Academy. His conditions were definitely 10 times or 100 times better than Wuk of the Kunlun Sea. Severing Love, I'm especially happy that you can represent the Academy and come here. The Divine Master didn't forget our Big Dipper clan. Quickly follow me to the banquet. Big Dipper Skylord and Severing Love chatted for a while. He personally held each other's hands and sat on the main seat in the training hall. They were like two gods being worshipped by the world. Everyone, please return to your seats. Big Dipper Jichong said with a smile. The ceremony was about to begin. Zhang San, Qing Rong, and the leader of the South Yard, the elder Cheng Huai, returned to their seats. At this moment, groups of disciples from the Big Dipper Mountain strode in from both sides of the training ground in an extremely orderly manner. They held bejeweled nectar and delicacies, and they placed them on every single banquet table. From the top of the stairs to the bottom, not a single viewing platform was left out. However, they only placed them halfway. Halfway down the celestial worthy peak, there was no more wine or delicacies. This was because the people below were not qualified to enjoy them at the same time as the experts above. Even so, the others were respectful and did not show any dissatisfaction. My grandson, Big Dipper E, has cultivated for 400 years and entered the divine path. He has inherited the divine legacy of the Big Dipper clan. Today, I invite all the friends of the divine realm to witness. From now on, when Big Dipper E goes out, he will represent the Big Dipper clan and the entire Big Dipper Mountain. Big Dipper Skylord said loudly. His voice rolled down. His calm tone contained an invisible majesty. Congratulations, Skylord. Congratulations, Izun. Everyone on the divine peak said in unison. Big Dipper Skylord nodded and faced Big Dipper E. From now on, your words and actions represent the face of the Big Dipper clan. Tianluan should have the aura of Tianluan and not be as frivolous as before. I will bear that in mind. Big Dipper Yi's expression was solemn. In the past, he could be unrestrained in the divine realm and do some ridiculous things. However, from now on, he could not be unrestrained. He had to be strict with himself and pay attention to the dignity of his clan. Big Dipper Skylord coveted Big Dipper E. In the future, his grandson would be a Tianluan powerhouse with responsibility and responsibility. He raised his cup and said, "Friends, please." After that, Big Dipper Skylord drank first. "Skylord, please." Everyone drank together. Senior Skylord, Izun has already proven his divinity. Today, Elder Severing Love came here on behalf of the Academy. Why not let Izun become Senior Severing Love's disciple and enter the Academy? Someone in the training hall said. Although Big Dipper Yi's background was extraordinary and could be said to be at the peak of the divine realm, and had Big Dipper Skylord teaching him the divine path, compared to the Academy, the latter was superior. After all, the Divine Master would occasionally visit the Academy. If Big Dipper Yi was lucky enough, there was a high chance that he could get close to the Divine Master. Ha! Although Old Man has the same idea, the Academy is not a place where anyone can enter. I wonder if old friend Severing Love will take a liking to my grandson. The Skylord laughed loudly. The Big Dipper clan's mountain moving divine ability is the best in the sword world. Why would your grandson need Elder Severing Love's teachings? Wouldn't that be a waste of his time? Sword God Severing Love smiled. Big Dipper, he immediately felt disappointed. Elder Severing Love's meaning was obvious. He would not accept a disciple. Many people in the training hall revealed a regretful expression. In the seamless sword world, other than the Divine Master, elder sword gods like Elder Severing Love were all powerful in the Sword Tao. Anyone who could become a disciple of one of them was extremely lucky. However, the Academy was not a place where anyone could enter. One had to go through a strict selection process. Only 1 or 2 lucky people would be favored by the Academy every few hundred years or even 1,000 years. This depended on the Academy's attitude. There was no fixed time for the selection process, and it depended on the situation. This was why the quota was so precious. Many big clans in the Divine Realm hoped to send their geniuses to the Academy, including the Big Dipper Mountain, the South Academy, and the Eastern Immortal Sky. Elder Severing Love, I heard that the Academy will be holding a sword conference soon. There will be no restrictions, and all planes in the seamless Divine Realm can participate. Is that true? The sect master of the Hidden Pills sect asked. This matter, Elder Severing Love seemed to be worried. He paused and nodded. It is true. There is no need to hide it from you. Seamless told us that in 3 months, the Academy will be holding a sword conference to add some new blood to increase the Academy's strength. The Seamless that Severing Love mentioned was the Seamless Divine Master. As soon as he said this, the entire peak was in an uproar. So the rumor was true. In fact, many clan leaders and sect masters knew that the Seamless Sword World, as one of the great Tao Sword Worlds, had the weakest foundation. It was indeed inferior to Rikujinji and True Dragon Sword World. Regardless of the cultivation of the Divine Masters or the situation of the cultivators in the world, it was inferior to the other 2 worlds, especially in recent years. As the monstrous geniuses of Rikujinji and True Dragon Sword World broke through to the Divinity Realm one after another, the gap between the Seamless Realm and them grew bigger and bigger. For example, Lucio, the son of Divine Master Lu, and Long Mia, the 6th son of Divine Master Long, had forged the Celestial Wheel and perfectly inherited the bloodline of the 2 Divine Masters. On the other hand, there were very few people in the Seamless Divine Realm who could compare to Lucio and Long Mia. Even if there were, it was because they were strong and had cultivated for a long time. If they were compared to their peers, there was almost no one in the Seamless Realm who could match Lucio and Long Mia. After the uproar, the celestial worthy peak fell into a short silence. The clan leaders and sect masters, including the Northern Dipper Skylord, fell into deep thought. They all had their own ideas. Although the princes of Divine Master Lu and Divine Master Long are strong, our Seamless Divine Realm isn't weak either. After all, the Celestial Will doesn't represent the overall strength. Someone said, now that Izun has become a god, he should be the pillar of our Divine Realm and fight for a place to enter the Academy. In front of the monstrous geniuses of Rikujinji and True Dragon Sword World, we should show the power of our Seamless Divine Realm. That's right. Izun will definitely be able to pass the Academy's examination and become a disciple that the Academy will focus on training. Here, let us congratulate you in advance. Everyone toasted. Ha ha, my friends, you're too kind. My grandson is not the pillar of the Divine Realm. This kind of qualification should be given to the new disciple of the South Academy's dean. The Northern Dipper Skylord took a sip of wine, put down the wine bottle, and glanced at Nangong Miao. Among the rising stars of the Divine Realm, Nangong Miao's reputation was extremely high, and he was also very confident. In all honesty, the Northern Dipper Skylord felt that Izun was still a bit lacking when compared to Lucio and Long Mia. The little disciple of the South Academy's dean can indeed take on a great responsibility. The immortal divine master said, I believe that Nangong Miao is already confident of entering the academy, right? The soaring cloud divine master smiled. My junior brother's cultivation is still shallow. He can't be compared to the geniuses of Rikujinji and Long Mia. The leader of the South Academy smiled and complimented. Prince Lucio and Prince Long Mia can be considered the top of the current generation of the Great Path Sword World. However, as the senior just said, the grade of the Heavenly Wheel doesn't necessarily represent the overall strength. If I'm lucky enough to enter the academy and receive the guidance of the seniors, I might be able to fight. Nangong Miao said proudly. After hearing this, everyone was shocked. Nangong Miao was indeed arrogant and talked big. You? Sihuan pointed at Nangong Miao. In the next moment, he suddenly laughed and held his stomach. Forget it. Don't stand in front of them with your legs shaking and peeing your pants. It's embarrassing. How dare Nangong Miao compare himself to Lucio and Long Mia? Although Sihuan had never seen Lucio and Long Mia from the information he received from the Sikong residents, these two were extremely monstrous. They were completely qualified to replace the divine masters of their father generation. What Nangong Miao had forged was a Saint-grade Heaven's Wheel, a mere Great Heaven's Wheel. He had acknowledged a South Courtyard Dean with a profound cultivation as his master. In the divine realm, it was alright to bluff people, but if it were to really compete with Lucio, it might not even be able to withstand a single move. This was not because Sihuan looked down on the other party. After all, the news from the Sikong residents was very convincing. If there was anyone in the infinite divine realm who could withstand the pressure of Lucio and Long Mia, it definitely wouldn't be Nangong Miao and Big Dipper E. It would only be the core disciples of the academy. However, those people had been in the divine realm for too long and had been cultivating in the academy. They couldn't lower their status and bully people who were weaker than them. Thinking of this, Sihuan glanced at Qin Hao beside him with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Until now, he still hadn't figured out the grade of Qin Hao's heavenly wheel. However, from the day he received a palm strike from Fairy Qing Rong, it was somewhat unfathomable. Perhaps Qin Hao could try to enter the academy. If he was selected and received the guidance of the elders of the sword world, he might be able to fight with Lucio. In addition, there was also the yellow-clothed fairy from the eastern immortal heaven. Sihuan shrunk his head and secretly glanced at her. The yellow-clothed fairy was called Loi. She was also an extremely ruthless character. She had an immortal grade heavenly wheel. Perhaps no one in the divine realm knew about this. Chapter 2045. The grade of the heavenly wheel was extremely important in the divine path. Even if one's attainment was not mentioned, its advantages and disadvantages greatly limited the heavenly wheel's potential. Especially when both sides had the same attainment, the effect was the most obvious. For example, Nangong Miao, who was also of the reincarnation lineage, how could a saint-grade heavenly wheel defeat Lucio's immortal grade heavenly wheel? Unless one used attainment to suppress the other, the chance of winning was almost zero. Although Sihuan's private life was terrible, he had a thorough understanding of the divine path. The immortal grade heavenly wheel contained much more divine power than a saint-grade heavenly wheel. As for the power of divine techniques, how could Lucio and Long Miao's divine powers be weaker than those of the South Yard? Nangong Miao thought too highly of himself. At this moment, the people of the South Yard saw Sihuan laughing and mocking Nangong Miao, and they all showed traces of anger. Haha, young Master C is right. I, Nangong Miao, may not be as good as Lucio and Prince Long Miao, but I'm curious about young Master C. You stopped at the Emperor's path and have no time to improve. How can you have the nerve to say the word shame when you see people of the same generation consecutively proving themselves? Nangong Miao looked at Sihuan with a smile. The grandson of West Capital's Daesikong, a trusted follower of the Divine Master, who was more ashamed of the word shame. You? Sihuan slammed his palm on the table and stood up. My junior brother is just stating facts. As a descendant of the Seekong family, don't you care about your own cultivation first? Or, young Master C, do you think you can lead the infinite realm to a new height? Elder Chung Huai of the South Yard said coldly. Ha ha. The people of the South Yard laughed one after another. The West Capital's little overlord becoming the pillar of the divine realm was probably the funniest thing today. In terms of mastery of sensual pleasures, no one present could beat Si Huan. Asking him to become the pillar of swordsmanship? Sorry, he wasn't worthy. Creak. Si Huan clenched his fists, and blue veins appeared on his neck. He seemed to have reached his limit. Zhang Xian's expression was ugly as he glared at Chung Huai. Chung Huai shrugged at Zhang Xian, indicating that he had misspoken and was sorry. All the forces in the domain of the gods knew that it was true that Si Huan's domineering behavior was a headache, but his cultivation was indeed the only sore spot of the Seekong residents. His peers had stepped into the divine path one after another, but Si Huan had been unable to break through to the emperor level. As the grandson of Daisakong and the disciple of the divine master, he had truly embarrassed the domain of the gods. On the side, Big Dipper, he was secretly smiling. That's enough. The West Capital and the South Yard are both top-notch orthodoxies. They maintain order in the divine realm on behalf of the divine master. Northern Dipper Empyrean said in a dignified voice. He wasn't afraid that the people here would laugh at him. Severing Love silently glanced at Si Huan, shook his head, and sighed. A trace of sympathy welled up in his heart. Si Huan's inability to break through to the emperor level was due to a special reason. It was not because of his poor talent or his laziness. Not only that, but Severing Love also knew that Si Huan was secretly working hard on his cultivation. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he worked, he could not reverse his destiny. Because his fate was flawed, he was destined to be unable to achieve great things in his life. Therefore, he pretended to be arrogant and domineering to deceive the eyes of the world. He thought that by doing so, he could make the orthodoxies of the domain of the gods fear him. Arrogance was just Si Huan's protective clothing. Let's drink. Severing Love's heart was slightly heavy as he raised his wine glass to the crowd. The Celestial Lord sighed silently and drank with Severing Love. He was also aware of Si Huan's situation. After all, Si Huan almost died back then. It was Daisakong who begged the Divine Master to use the power of the world to save Si Huan's life. The little overlord of the West Capital was essentially a pitiful child. Some people improve quickly and have remarkable achievements, so they like to show off. On the other hand, those who are unknown are easy to ignore. Brother Nangong, how can you be so sure that young Master C will not enter the divine realm? In my opinion, when young Master C enters the divine realm one day, he may be stronger than you. Not only young Master C, but all the brothers in the Seekong residence are silent and hardworking, unlike some people who like to show off their achievements. At this time, a voice came from his side. Si Huan's heartstrings trembled. He lowered his head and said, "Third year." Bang! The wine glass in Nangong Miao's hand fell heavily. His gaze fell on the silver-haired youth. What do you mean by that? The person who likes to show off is me, Nangong Miao. If you say so, then so be it. In any case, you're always right. Wuk drank the wine in his hand. He didn't like people like Si Huan, but during the days they lived in the Seekong residence, Daisakong didn't treat them unfairly. Apart from the uncomfortable feeling of being suppressed in the dungeon at first, he later opened the Heavenly Book Pavilion to Zien and the others and provided many divine crystals to help them cultivate. For this reason, Wuk couldn't let outsiders slander Daisakong's grandson. Moreover, Wuk didn't like Nangong Miao. How dare you? Chung Huai shouted as he stood up straight. Nangong Miao was his junior brother, and the South Campus had high hopes for him. His master saw a Nangong Miao as a rising banner of the South Campus. His status was like 7-star righteousness, the grandson of the Celestial Venerate. Nangong Miao's words were undoubtedly the attitude of the South Campus. Wuk's words were mocking the South Campus. Nangong Miao is right. Si Huan can never step into the divine path in this lifetime, Seven-star righteousness said. Outsiders didn't know about Si Huan's situation, but the core members of the Four Titans knew a little. Si Huan's innate fate was flawed. Shut up, the Celestial Venerate said. The Celestial asked, how could such a thing be made public? It would damage the Western capital. Grandfather, Si Huan's fate spirit is damaged, and he is trapped in the Emperor's path, unable to ascend to the divine path. This matter will be known by others sooner or later. If I don't say it now, won't the forces of the divine realm find it strange in 100 or 1,000 years? Big Dipper, he looked at Qin Hao and said, as for what you said, there's a hierarchy in the path of cultivation, and the strength cannot be determined immediately. This is true in the cultivation world. However, Si Huan does not have that opportunity. Pa. As soon as Seven-star righteousness's voice fell, a palm wind immediately slapped him in the face, throwing him from the banquet to the center of the training field. Seven-star righteousness angrily shouted, get out! When Daisakong was still a page boy, he had always followed Sword God Avicii and served the Divine Lord. He had experienced countless life and death tribulations, and the relationship between master and servant had surpassed familial love. Now, the Divine Lord had allowed Daisakong to leave him and establish a generation of fame, becoming the ruler of the West capital. His grandson's disability was enough to make people sympathize with him. How could Seven-star righteousness open his scars in front of everyone today? If Seven-star righteousness was born with a disability, how would the Divine Lord feel? This slap was especially loud, and it spread all the way down the 1,000 steps of the Celestial Mountain. All the heavenly wheel powerhouses on the viewing platform heard it clearly, and they couldn't help but be shocked. Today, Seven-star righteousness was actually slapped to the ground by the Divine Lord. What was even more shocking was that Daisakong's grandson's cultivation had stagnated. It turned out that he was suffering from a fatal illness. At this moment, on the densely packed Dao Peak, the powerhouses of the divine realm and hundreds of thousands of cultivators were all shocked. Divine Lord, I have other matters to attend to, so I won't disturb you any longer. Sword God, Severing Love's expression was cold as he stood up from his seat. Severing Love, I didn't discipline him well. The Divine Lord lowered his head. Chapter 2046. Wooling Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Complete. Defeat in the Celestial Worthy Peak Training Hall. 7 wings of the South Yard stood there, waiting for Wuck to make his move. This battle had attracted the attention of everyone on the peak. At the top of the 1,000-step staircase, there were countless viewing platforms, and at the foot of the mountain, cultivators were all looking up. Today was supposed to be the Big Dipper Ascension ceremony, and all the forces in the divine realm had come to observe the ceremony. Make your move, Seven Wings said with a sullen face. Next, he would teach this ignorant swordsman on behalf of the South Yard. Wu Kei faced the southern courtyard disciple, Qi Yi. Sword splendor flowed around his body, and he suddenly shot forward like an extremely fast light. He closed his 2 fingers together, and his sword fingers emitted an incomparably dazzling sharpness as he pointed forward. This was not the golden finger. Although Qin Hao and Wuck often exchanged sword techniques in private and taught each other sword skills, the golden finger required a solid foundation from the moment one stepped into the martial way. He had missed the training of the finger technique and could not fully exert its power. Now Wuck's finger was a set of sword fingers that evolved from the golden finger and his sword will. Perhaps it was not as powerful as Qin Hao's golden finger, but it included his own nature sword principle and was no small matter. Seeing this, Qi Yi sneered and stepped forward. His movement technique was extremely fast, like a gust of wind. He also pointed at Wu Kei, and a glaring sword light condensed on his finger. Showing off your sword fingers in front of senior brother Seven Wings is stupid. A disciple of the South Yard laughed sarcastically. Everyone in the South Yard knew that Seven Wings was the most accomplished in the sword fingers. He was the disciple of the elder finger of the inner yard. Fighting head-on with Seven Wings was asking for trouble. Bang! A muffled sound rang out from the training hall. The smile of the southern courtyard disciple who had just spoken immediately froze on his face. As Flawless and Seven Wings came into contact, two flashing sword fingers collided. A figure was suddenly sent flying. It was Seven Wings. How could it be? In an instant, all the disciples and elders of the South Yard stood up from their seats, and their expressions were full of shock. In one move, Seven Wings was at a disadvantage. As Chi flew backward, he felt a sharp pain in his finger. He felt as if his finger bones had been pierced by a sword will. The sword will of the cold-faced youth he had fought with was rare and contained an indestructible power. He had lost to the sword will, not the finger technique. He was relatively familiar with the talents of the Seekong residents in the western capital, but today was the first time he had seen a junior with such a strong sword will like Wuck. It felt as if he had jumped out of thin air. Was it because he had not paid attention to the divine realm for too long that he had overlooked something? Seven Wings, do your best. This person's strength is beyond your imagination. Nangong Yao shouted, his voice rolling out. Even though he had stepped into the divine way and cast the heavenly wheel, he still felt a trace of danger from Wuck's sword will. No wonder the western capital had sent this person to the southern courtyard to ask for advice. They had clearly come prepared. Seven Wings had lost a great deal in this battle. Nangong Yao could only ask him to do his best to avoid losing too badly. Open. Seven Wings did not doubt Nangong Yao's judgment at all. After all, he was the only genius of the southern courtyard who had suppressed him. He roared, and a silver brilliance erupted from the training hall. It was incomparably gorgeous. Then, huge wings spread out from Seven Wings' back. He was like a divine bird soaring in the sky. He took a step and soared into the sky, trying to avoid the golden divine sword. Wuck looked up at the sky and flicked his finger. The golden divine sword turned into a row of light and flew up from the training hall. It quickly caught up with Seven Wings. What a flexible sword will. It's fast and accurate. Who is this person? In the seats of the training hall, countless sect leaders and divine Lord Tianlun looked at Wuck. It was rare to see a junior with such terrifying control. At this moment, Wuck seemed to be confirming what Qin Hao had said before. Most of the time, people only saw a show-off clown. On the contrary, people who were unknown were the easiest to ignore and not pay attention to. However, one could amaze the world with a single brilliant feat at this moment. Whether it was Sword God severing love, Northern Dipper Skylord, or the countless sect leaders and divine lords in the training hall, they were all shocked by Wuck's strength, making him the center of attention. Looking at the expressions of the many old seniors in the divine realm, Qin Hao's reaction was very calm. It was as if this was how it should be. He's not serious enough, Qin Hao whispered in his heart. Although Seven Wings was almost unable to withstand Wuck's attacks without using his best sword skills, Qin Hao believed that Wuck was not serious enough. Ding! Ding! A series of attacks rang out in the sky. Seven Wing was unable to dodge in time and had no choice but to use his huge wings to wrap around his body, forcibly enduring the golden divine swords. Following the continuous attacks, every collision seemed to shake his heart. His wings were suffused with intense pain, as if they were about to be pierced through and into his heart.